Director Sethy,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Gunther,
Here.
Huang, here, and Weed.
Here. Please join us in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since we're on a Zoom meeting, do we wish to have some presentation for information?
Yeah, a brief housekeeping remarks, President Weed, if that's okay. We don't have additional members of the public with us this evening yet, but I'll go ahead and go through some brief housekeeping remarks. I think the board may have noticed that we've added a fair amount of information on the agenda itself. The top of the agenda, detailed instructions as to how to participate in our board meetings as a member of the public who's participating virtually. But I'll go ahead with some more brief remarks going forward. Good evening. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this board meeting. My name is Ed Stevenson, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public participating in person may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda, staff reports, presentation materials are all available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. This board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. Again, thank you everyone for attending. And again, President Weed, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Fine, thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Do we have any written comments to the board?
Nothing
There being
received.
none, there appears to be no one from the public present, so I trust. Oh, we do. So if there is a member of the public who wishes to address the board on an item which is not on our agenda, please do so at this moment.
And my apologies if that member of the public was on the list before I got started and indicated that there wasn't one. So.
All right, we see no response, so let us then move on to the consent calendar. Does anyone wish to add items to the consent calendar?
I'll make the motion to add items 5.1 through 5.11 to the consent calendar.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have
President, there's one item on the consent calendar.
is that on the consent calendar? I was looking for it.
Yeah, it's 4.3.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the ones we were adding.
Yeah.
So I'll amend my motion to add 5.1 through 5.11, but remove 4.3 from the consent calendar.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second that one.
It's been moved and seconded. If there's no discussion, roll call, please.
Director Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang, aye, and Weed.
Aye. And we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Director Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang, aye, and Weed.
Aye. If we wish to take item 4.3 next, this is one that I have recused myself in the past since I own property in the immediate vicinity, and I was also involved in a lawsuit related to CEQA for the approval of the project. So, should I leave the room, I take it?
Yes.
And be on the
For 5.3?
4.3.
Item 4.3.
Oh, 4.3.
Right. Thank you. And the gavel over to Director Sethy.
Okay. Thank you. I will open up this item to board discussion. If there's any comments or questions, I do have some comments to make on this item too, but with no conflict of interest.
No,
Okay, I submitted questions to the general manager and our general counsel earlier this week in regard to this matter. I was, we have some exhibits in our board presentation, exhibits A through C, page 53 through 55. And I was feeling that there was a little bit of incomplete information with regard to Exhibit C in terms of how much we were charging the developer for all of these 8-inch diameter pipelines that are going into the development. And so I got a very good answer back from our staff, and I feel very satisfied with it. There is a considerable amount of money we are going to make off of this project. And after many years of lawsuits and city council discussions, I'm very enthusiastic actually about this development going into the community. I realize that there are many people in the Niles community that are not in favor of this, but I stand with the council members that voted in favor of this. And so I turn it back to anybody on the board here that may wish to make a comment. This is the Gateway project.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled, but, you know, in a way, though, I am happy to see something happening finally. That area has been vacant for years. We need the housing. It needs to be cleaned up. I'm glad we're moving ahead.
So, is there any public input here, please, on this item? Seeing none, I will close this discussion, and we'll move for a board vote. Is there someone who would like to make a motion here?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right.
Huang, aye, and Sethy.
Aye. Note that Director Weed is absent on the vote due to a conflict of interest. Thank you. We turn the gavel back to President Weed. You're back in charge.
Thank you.
We did have some discussion. I had some comments.
I trust, okay. We'll find out. The minutes how it went.
We passed it 4-0.
All right, then, item 5.12 is an authorization to enter participation agreements with the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency for fiscal year 2022-23 for the water use efficiency and related services program. And I would note that I serve as the representative of this board and therefore to be a director on the 26-member board of directors of BOSCA. Thank you.
Okay, and so for this item, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Laura Heides, to get us started.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. This item goes hand in hand with our drought update tonight. Excuse me, as the programs we are seeking approval for provide important tools for our customers to save water during the severe drought we're experiencing and into the future for long-term savings. The district routinely participates in water use efficiency programs administered by the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, or BOSCA, under annually renewed program-specific participation agreements. In doing so, the district leverages BOSCA staff resources and benefits from economy of scale pricing to better achieve cost-effective water use efficiency goals. Each year, the district must determine which BOSCA programs and services to renew, add, or end. For fiscal year 2022-23, the district proposes to renew participation agreements for the rain barrel rebate, lawn begone rebate, regional smart controller, large landscape, irrigation hardware rebate, and the water loss management programs. These programs provide rebates and tools directly to district customers to reduce water use at home, for example, through the rain barrel and lawn begone programs, or to significantly improve the efficiency of irrigation systems and schedules, such as through the regional smart controller, irrigation hardware, and large landscape programs, which are all critical to saving water during drought. No programs or services are proposed to be added or ended in comparison to last year. The total maximum cost to participate in these programs is $454,000, with a maximum of $105,000 paid directly to BOSCA and the remainder paid directly to customers through individual rebate checks issued by the district. Funds for the programs are proposed for inclusion in the fiscal year 2022-23 budget, as presented at the May 18th, 2022 Board Workshop and included for approval tonight. Rebates and incentives for all current programs are adopted in the district's rate and fee schedule. All of the proposed programs are in alignment with Strategy B of the district's Water Efficiency Master Plan, or WEMP, and will help the district's customers conserve water during drought. This item was reviewed with the Water Resources and Conservation Committee on May 24, 2022. This action will help meet the district's Strategic Plan Goal 2.1, maintain and enhance sustainability and reliability of local and regional water supplies. So tonight's recommendation is by motion, authorize the general manager to enter into participation agreements with the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency for the fiscal year 2022-23 rain barrel rebate program, lawn begone rebate, regional smart controller, large landscape, irrigation hardware rebate, and water loss management programs for a total maximum cost of $454,000 for all programs. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the public? If there are none, then let us move to the board. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board?
None from me.
Make a comment that I'm supportive of this item and appreciate that we're renewing our commitment.
Oh, let me note that BOSCA has a budget of about $4 million a year. $1 million of that are subscription programs. They have their own staff that run programs district-wide. This board historically has not been supportive of hiring additional water conservation personnel on the regular staff, but are supportive, and the subscription programs are self-sufficient, and that pays for the staff and operations. The second point is that it wasn't that long ago that we had no participation at all, and for many years had no participation at all in the subscription programs of BOSCA. We felt our own staff was doing the job. I think this is probably more of a testimony to the improved quality of the BOSCA programs that we can see the benefit and the need for enhanced conservation in our district. That's a fair comment, but my observation. So thank you. If there are no further comments by staff, let's call for a roll call, please.
I'll make the motion.
I'll call for a motion, I'm sorry. Seconds. So it's been moved by
Director Huang,
Director Huang.
seconded by
Director
Second.
Gunther.
Okay, roll call, please.
Director Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. Okay, our next item, if I can get it up, is
next item is 5.13, resolution amending the fiscal year 2022-23 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program for mid-cycle revisions.
Thank you.
And for that item, I'll turn it over to our Director of Finance and Administration, Mr. John Wunderlich, to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board, staff, and public. On June 10th, 2021, the Board of Directors adopted the two-year budget for fiscal year 2021-22 and fiscal year 2022-23, and the 25-year capital improvement program. As part of the district's two-year budget cycle, the board reviews and adopts mid-cycle revisions to the budget and the CIP at the end of the first fiscal year. The proposed mid-cycle revisions were reviewed at the April 19th, 2022 Finance Committee and May 18th, 2022 Board Budget Workshop. Review and adoption of the amended fiscal year 2022-23 budget and the updated 25-year CIP will help meet the district's strategic plan goals 3.2, ensure cost reasonableness, and 3.3, promote financial transparency. And with us on Zoom this evening is Mr. Sidney Aum, our financial analysis supervisor, and he will now provide us with a presentation on the budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wonderlick. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public, staff. I'm Sidney Aum, the financial analysis supervisor. I will present the item this evening. So this is the agenda for the evening. I will review the assumption and updates since the budget workshops in May, review the mid-cycle budget and the financial planning model metrics, and I will conclude with staff presentation. This graphic illustrates the district two-year budget cycle. We are in year 2 of the budget cycle. The budget process starts in December and concludes with board adoption in June. Staff reviewed the proposed mid-cycle budget with the Finance Committee in April and with the board at the budget workshop in May. The proposed amended budget for fiscal year 22-23 is presented to you this evening for consideration and adoption. As you know, the budget includes several key assumptions. Water revenue estimate is based on lower water demand compared to the adopted budget. Future annual rate increase is assumed at 3%. SFPUC is increasing their rates by 15.9% in fiscal year 22-23. The increase was previously projected to be 5.4%, so it's a significant increase effective July 1. The budget includes costs for the initiatives for water supply reliability. That include Delta Conveyance Project, Los Vaquerios Expansion Projects, and Water Reuse Project. The budget assumes full funding of our capital program, $56.7 million in planned capital expenditures included for fiscal year 22-23. And it also includes maintaining the contributions to pension and OPEB at a more aggressive levels until the district achieves full funding status. Again, these were discussed with the board last month. Labor and benefit costs include 3.25% cost of living adjustment effective July 1, 2022. That is consistent with the labor contracts. But the proposed staffing changes include reclassifying 3 vacant positions to better meet the need of the district. Those positions is on the slide. And adding 1 defined term water use efficiency specialist to assist with tasks related to the ongoing drought. The Human Resources and Risk Management Division is reorganized from the Office of the General Manager to the new combined Finance and Administration Department. As discussed at the May 18 budget workshop, staff indicated that there would be additional revisions to the amended budget. So the CIP before you this evening includes changes to the project schedule and cost, resulting in a net increase of $700,000. Chemical costs included additional $19,000 to reflect the final pricing, which we now have. So total chemical costs increased by 33% compared to the adopted budget. This is our total revenues for all funds. I will briefly just highlight some items here. The current fiscal year 21-22 revenues, looking at the estimated, it's estimated to come in 3% below budget. That's mostly due to lower water revenue, as well as delays in expected grants and reimbursement due to the timing of capital projects. For fiscal year 22-23, amended budget, even with a full year of stage rate revenue, as you see there, $11.3 million. The combined water revenue are expected to be about $1.2 million less compared to the adopted budget. And looking at the total revenues, they're expected to increase 6% compared to the fiscal year 21-22 estimated actuals, as grants and reimbursement revenues were delayed due to the timing of major grant-funded projects. Next. So this is our total expenses. Again, this is for all funds. So the total expenses are estimated $10 million below budget in the current fiscal year 21-22. That's mostly as a result of shifted capital project schedules. For fiscal year 22-23 amended budget, there is an increase of $6.2 million in operating expenses compared to the adopted budget. Those increases are in water purchases, chemicals, as I mentioned earlier, services, labor contracts, expense projects, and rebates. Compared to the fiscal year 21-22 year-end estimate, looking at the amended budget, the total expenses increased $22.8 million as a result, again, of the capital project shift, $500,000 in additional debt service as a result of our refinancing, and $9.8 million increase in operating costs. I will pause. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh. I'm not seeing the slide 10 or slide.
Yeah, something's going wrong with this presentation. Just stand by for a second.
Okay, thank you.
We can see it on our computers, however.
If you would like, I can continue, or I can wait.
Yeah, actually, Sydney, just for the benefit of the public, we'll try and get it back on the Zoom share so that everybody can see the same thing. So it shouldn't take more than a minute here
Go there.
as I knock on wood.
It's only about 150 million.
Okay.
All right.
We're at the right spot. Thank you. So here are the total cash balances for all funds. So I talked about revenues, talked about expenses. Here's looking at the total cash balances. There's actuals and estimated cash balances for each of the fiscal year. So since fiscal year 2021, looking back a couple of years, ended better than originally estimated. The fiscal year 21-22 started off on better footing by $5.4 million at the beginning fund balance or cash balance. We expect to finish fiscal year 21-22, $11.6 million better than the adopted budget. And the ending balance in the fiscal year 22-23 amended budget is projected to be about $16.2 million below the current year estimate. And part of it is a result of the district no longer moving forward with the SRF loan, as you see there at the $9.7 million. Okay, this slide shows the reserves and the debt indicator. indicators, and it included an update to the reserve policy that the board approved earlier as an item. The main takeaway on this slide is that the reserves meet or exceed the established targets set by the board, and the district maintains strong debt coverage ratios, as you see there on the slide, close to 6 for amended budget, 600%. This pie chart illustrates the percentage breakdown of total general fund labor by cost center, including capital projects, customer jobs, and debt service. The total general fund amended budget for fiscal year 22-23 for the district is $168.2 million, of which labor made up 37% of the total. Okay, this slide shows a proposed 10-year CIP by program. This is totaling $511 million. As you can see, the AMI program is scheduled to be completed fiscal year 24-25, and then we have other programs ramping up over the planning horizon. I want to add that you don't see it here, but the financial planning model and the 25-year CIP includes major investments and financial commitments over the span of the 25-year planning horizon. That includes Delta Conveyance projects, as I mentioned earlier, Los Vaqueros expansion project, AMI, and includes full replacement in 20 years, main renewal program, water reclamation phase 1 projects. So the investment in those projects I just mentioned total a little over $1 billion over the 25-year planning period. You saw the reserve slide earlier. Wanted to focus on the capital project sinking fund here. As you can see, the fund, the project sinking capital project sinking fund, is estimated to have a balance of $54.2 million by the end of this next fiscal year, the amended budget year. But those funds are projected to be drawn down completely by fiscal year 25-26. So that's the takeaway here for funds for projects that are planned for the CIP. They accumulate due to the unanticipated timing issues with the projects, and those funds are allocated or retained in the capital project sinking fund. And as we move forward, the funds get drawn down, again, as you can see there, by fiscal year 25-26, the fund balance in the capital project sinking fund is 0. So our focus for this evening is the mid-cycle budget, which is looking at the 2-year budget. But as you know, the district uses the financial planning model to look several years out into the future. So here we are presenting the financial metrics from the model through fiscal year 2027. So this first chart here shows the general fund ending balances projected to be approximately $200,000 above the reserve target in fiscal year end 2027. As you notice, we have large balance in the current fiscal year and the budget year, but then the balance in the low year is just slightly above the reserve target. Compared to the adopted, when the board adopted the budget last June or the June before, the general fund ending balances were projected at $21 million above the reserve target. This metric shows the debt coverage ratios. As I mentioned earlier, the district maintained very strong coverage ratios, which helps with our credit rating. For fiscal year 22-23 amended budget, the coverage ratio is 600%. And the coverage ratio is around 300% in the low year. And for fiscal year ending 2027, does show an uptick due to the higher net revenues compared to debt service payment. That's how the ratio is calculated. This slide shows the comparison between operating revenues to operating expenses. The main takeaway here is the district relies on non-operating revenue, such as property taxes and interest income, to fill in the funding gaps between operating revenue and operating expenses. We anticipate receiving $13 million in property tax revenues and over $3 million in interest income in the current fiscal year 21-22. This metrics illustrate the comparison between rate and charge revenue to revenue requirement. What this is showing is that the district relies on other funding sources to meet its revenue requirement and fund the capital projects that are funded by the general fund. And the last metric that we would like to show here is the metric on the CIP. This shows the total CIP through the planning horizon, showing by funding sources. As you can see, the district pays for the majority of the projects on a pay-as-you-go basis. And we program $30 million in bond funds in fiscal year 2025, as represented by the pink bar there, to help fund the capital program. So here's a last slide of the presentation with staff recommendation. Adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 2022-23 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program for mid-cycle revisions. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
First, are there any other comments from staff? There being none, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the board on the capital improvement? No hands raised.
I do see a hand from.
Oh, there is a hand. Mr. Please.
Yes,
You are on.
thank you. I just have a real quick question referring to, I believe it's slide 14 of the presentation, where Mr. Ohm was discussing the need for non-rate and charge revenue for the gap, to cover the gap. Can you just outline quickly maybe the top 3 sources of that additional revenue that's closing the gap? Okay, so I'm sorry, it looks like it's a different slide number than the one that was posted to the web. It's the rate revenue versus revenue requirement slide. It was near the end of the presentation.
It is slide 18.
That one right there. Thank you.
Yes, so rate revenues, so let me go, so rate revenue, slide 18 we're looking at. Rate and charge revenue is made up of water revenue, as well as the equity buy-in component of our facility renewal fund, and other revenues, and exclude the facility improvement fund. The revenue requirements made up of total O&M plus debt service. So the red line there represents, so red line represent rate revenue, and then the purple bar is the revenue requirement. So the rate revenue meets or exceeds the revenue requirement. However, when we add the general fund CIP on top of that, represented by the green bar, it's not sufficient. So what the district, how the district fund for that is the district relies on other revenue. So if we go to slide, the revenue slide that I mentioned earlier, slide 8, that will shows a breakdown of all the revenue sources. So if you, District Secretary, please move to slide 8. So one more, please. There you go. Thank you. So other revenue sources include the interest revenue, which is $3.7 million, as I indicated. The 1% tax allocation, $7.6 million, as well as the state water contracts tax, $5.9 million, as well as the other revenue, such as various refunds, property leases, and permit fees, and other revenues. So those are the 3 or 4 major other revenues or non-operating revenues that the district relies on to to pay for, to meet the revenue requirement and pay for the general fund CIP projects.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, do we have questions or comments by members of the board?
I have extensive comments.
Let this Director Sethy,
But I will defer to other board members first.
doesn't appear there is any other comment. Until I have an opportunity.
I have thought about this long and hard over the last month. This is going to be the first budget that I will not vote in favor of. And I will inform the staff and my fellow colleagues here about why. I'm very concerned that we as a board for the last 6 years keep adopting budgets and then the staff doesn't perform up to what we approve. And we're starting to have some very large deltas here. As I noted in the last board meeting, in the last fiscal year, we were $25 million short of our amended budget, not even the adopted budget, but the amended one. And for the current fiscal year that we're finishing this month, we are conservatively at least $50 million short of what we approved as a board. And I think the board is acting irresponsibly and I share in that responsibility. I think we are doing damage to our public. We have now built up what we call a sinking fund of $61 million or $65 million. And we're not supposed to be a bank for our customers. This is not the objective of the water district. We're investing these funds in the stock market, bond market, and it is irresponsible on the part of the board to be doing this for any public agency. And I also have some secondary concerns. You will note that on the total revenues for what was actual in fiscal year 1920, that we only have about a 1% increase in revenue to the amended budget for this fiscal year. During the same period of time, our total expenses are increasing over 30%. Over 30% in a 2-year or 3-year budget cycle. And I would have appreciated a secondary workshop where we as a board could have gotten under the hood of the engine here or the car vehicle of the district and said, where can we pare back on things that are going on in the district on the expense side of the operations? And I don't hear any of my fellow colleagues on the board asking these questions. I had to ask for a separate meeting with engineering and finance staff after our last workshop to go through these numbers. And in our board package, we also have the administrative headcount, which is starting to, in my opinion, reach an unacceptable level, up at 244, 245. And I looked at the specific headcount by department, and I think that we as a board and a staff need to look at where we can pare back on administrative staff. Every employee that we hire is about $1 million expense, in future costs to the district. I would like to also reference slide 14. Oh, no, yeah, 14. After that meeting that I had with our staff, I suggested that we put together this slide on the capital project sinking fund and where the money is going to be used, that we have this 65 million, 66 million that we've saved up. So I'm glad to see that we have an indicator for the community to show where we're going to use these monies that we have saved up and how they're going to be deployed. But nevertheless, I still have reservations about the speed at which we can get these projects done based on past experience over the last 6 years. We're just not getting the work done as we keep forecasting that we're going to do. And it makes me sick that we're actually saving up $66 million. I realize we're on a cash as we pay basis, but we are saving up way too much money on behalf of our ratepayers, and I object. And for that reason, this is the first time I am going to not vote in favor of this budget until we have a chance as a board and staff to do some cleanup work. Thank you.
Other board members have a comment to that?
Actually, may I follow up on that?
Please.
So I'm definitely for efficiency. As an agency, I think we could always look at ways to improve our efficiency. I think that's a given. But I guess my question is for staff. My understanding is that there are reasons why these capital projects do not proceed at the rate that we expected. Can you give us, the board, and our customers, a couple examples and reasons why the projects are delayed? Because in principle, I understand what Director Sethy is saying. We're not supposed to collect money for the sake of saving money and put it in the piggy bank. We're supposed to spend it. That is our whole basis. So can you help the board and our customer understand why we end up with this $66 million?
Sure. Yeah, we'd be happy to. And I'd invite any other comments from staff. But yes, the capital improvement program is the plan. And actual conditions don't always match the plan. And over the last couple of years, I think we've been over 80% expenditure rate, but I think that's still not the plan, right? So, we've done a number of things to try and be a little bit less aggressive with the plan in terms of the budget. But still, I totally understand the concern. And I think there's more we can do. And we've also talked about other potential approaches for funding the capital program that kind of smooths out how much cash we're maintaining on hand in order to execute the program. We can talk more about that at another time. But in terms of examples of why projects may not go according to plan, I think you see in the capital program, you can see there's lots and lots of projects, but there are several that are very high dollar projects. And when those get delayed, that makes the biggest impact on expenditure rate. And when projects don't enter construction according to the schedule, then that has the biggest impact on cash flow. And so some examples include a few projects that are kind of that have been held back over the last several months, including our Driscoll Road main renewal program, a main renewal project. That's a very high dollar project. It's been held up in sort of permitting and property related issues much longer than we like. Alvarado Niles Phase 2, the same kind of situation. And so those big dollar capital expenditures, when they get held up, it makes a big impact on expenditure rate. That's not to say we're happy with it at all. I don't like making excuses. That's just sort of the reality. These are things that are outside our control. We try and be reasonable with the budget and not be too aggressive with assumptions about timeline, but we also want to program these projects in so that they get assigned to staff and they get done. So I completely understand the concern, and this is something we'll continue to work on.
After, if I may, Director Huang,
Of course.
after my meeting with staff, I'm much more understandable about the spend down on the money that we've saved up. And I appreciated the staff preparing slide number 14 at my request for all of our purposes here. But the area where I'm most concerned about is over 4 fiscal years, including the amended budget that we're approving tonight. We have flat revenues essentially over 4 fiscal years. And our operating and non-operating expenses have gone up over 30% against that flat revenue stream. That's where I'm most concerned about, because we're going into the negative now each year at an increasing amount. And I have long asked this board to practice the art of covering all of our expenses, including depreciation and amortization, so that we break even. And so what we are doing as a board over the last 4 years is approving budgets that are putting us deeper and deeper in water each year. And I object to that. I think that we need to go in and look at the operating expenses and the non-operating expenses on slide 10 and ask ourselves some really difficult questions about how we're running the organization. If we have flat revenue from year to year, why are we approving budgets with such a sharp increase over 4 fiscal years? It doesn't make sense. I'm a businessman. I have to run or have run large businesses. This doesn't make sense. And as a businessman, I object to what's going on. And I've been noticing this over a few years, but I finally have to put my foot down and say, no more. That's it.
All right, thank you. Other comments from members of the board? Let me raise some questions. First of all, a minor question. We have an item later in our agenda on regional purified water pilot project. Is that in the CIP or not? It's a minor item, I'm sure.
That is in the
If it's
CIP.
there, it's- Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, it is.
That's,
Yes.
Mr. Ohm says it is in the CIP. It's not a big dollar item.
No, I just don't recall the board having that on our agenda when I didn't recognize it when we approved it. The next, though, to Director Sethy's comments, some of the issues you've raised, I believe, are structural with the district in the some 27 years I've been here. Part of that is the underperformance or under execution of the engineering department. At one point, it was so significant that the finance department would not refuse to accept the projections of the engineering department in putting together the budget. That was addressed over several changes of administration, and we've gotten much better execution. So when the issue is we're not executing, and then the same argument is made, well, we have too many staff. Might staffing and increased staff allow us to do better execution of the engineering and the allocation of that staff? Because I did not support adding additional conservation staff when I felt it should have been going into issues related to the operation of the district, including engineering. So that is a decision the board has made to put it into outreach, public outreach, et cetera, rather than operations. The second is our inability to do a budget. I've argued for years because of our failure to match variable income with variable expenses and fixed income with fixed expenses. We have it inverted. 1/3 to 2/3, and we're on the wrong side. In 2015, we were off by 40% in our budget because we had a sudden surge in income as we came out of the drought. That is a basic business principle, and we don't follow it. And for years, we've not followed it. We've tried to do workarounds with stage rates and other games, but they're workarounds. It's easy enough to do it directly. So I'm thankful for Director Sethy to take a stronger look at this. But let us look at trying to get our staffing to the point where we can do, and contracting to the point that we can do the execution. And take a hard look at trying to adjust our fixed rates and variable rates and put them in balance to what our expenses are. That's how you do a long-term budget with some sense of confidence. I would also ask that we look at identifying Bosca as a separate entity. The Bosca costs continue to grow. The cost of San Francisco water in the 20 years that Bosca's been in existence have gone from $1 per unit for water, $440 an acre foot, to $5 a unit, or $2,500 an acre foot. And moreover, Bosca does have conservation programs, which we are participating in to some extent. But there's another hidden cost on Bosca, which we need to take note of. Potential liability. San Francisco has an OPEB account, which they may be overstated in the sense that liability is that they're using a 4.4% discount rate. We're using a 6.5% discount rate. But their unfunded liability over the last less than 4 years has grown from $180 million, from $120 million to $180 million. Bosca's share of that is about 2/3. The Bosca share is growing at $1 million a month. Our cost on that is growing at 6% for $60,000 per month. That's worth noting at some point. Since it's a secondary, once removed, we're not required under the current mindset to put it in recognition in our finance statement, in our CalPERS, in our CalFIR. But it's something to be aware of and pay attention to. So I will be supporting the budget because we have chances to continue to work on it. But the items, I would argue that, note that I believe the issues raised by Director Sethy are structural and systemic. And it's not something it requires some fundamental changes in the way we structure our operations and our rate structure. Thank you. Is there any other comment on the item related to the budget or the capital improvement plan? If not, then let us call for get a motion for approval.
There's no other comments from the board?
Well, I have a comment
I mean,
then.
I really would appreciate
Well-
some feedback on what I'm saying here.
Okay,
I feel
I'll
like I'm
comment.
speaking to a blank audience.
You're not speaking to a blank audience.
Okay, thank you, Director.
I'm hearing we have the budget workshop coming up with the next set of rates. I was a swing vote on the last set of rates. It said 0. It was a risk. Maybe we went the wrong way. I'll take responsibility for that if we did. I heard what you said. I'm concerned too. I'm looking forward to pushing ahead. I don't necessarily agree with Director Weed on our rate structure. That's a difference between me and him. I got some ideas too. Rates are coming up. I think we have a wonderful opportunity here to go back into the grinding here and the into the dirt. There is an issue though in projects, and particularly one that bothers me is the Alvarado and Niles project. I mean, that one strikes home with me. I can't vote on it. I'm that close to it. We haven't started the second phase. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of reasons out there I could imagine because we're not the only one on that street. So I hear what you're saying. I want to digest it. I think we're funding our OPEB. I'd like to keep doing what we're doing with that. I think we should.
Agree with that.
I'd like to see what staff has to say in the upcoming months. We're going to be working on the budget. We're going to be digging into this stuff heavy for the next couple of years. Did we undershoot? Maybe. Are we suffering from problems that, are we going to get worse? Yeah. $7 gasoline's coming. It's already almost here. The chemical cost, granted, it was just a small portion of the budget, some of them were over 100%. I don't necessarily agree with Director Weed on the conservation people, though I don't necessarily disagree either because I believe in engineering people to get the jobs done. But I also understand that we're in a position in the state of California where we have to do that other side too. Politically, that's what we have to do. So I'm looking forward to seeing what staff has to hear or say in our next few meetings, next several meetings, actually. I believe they start next month. So I heard you, and I'm going to be looking deeper, but I'm not 100% sure how much we could address it. When you got a project like, for instance, the Driscoll Road project, still out there. We've been talking about these things now for 5 years. And so who are the holdups? Are they the cities? They could be. I mean, is Union City holding up the Alvarado Niles project? Maybe. Wouldn't surprise me. We've got a few other things that they're holding up over there too. So I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to get back into it. So I did hear you. I will support the budget tonight, but I heard you.
Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you.
If I can make one quick clarification, my understanding is not, Director Sethy's issues are not that didn't raise the rates high enough. You're saying that we're not spending the money
Correct.
that we
too.
have. So it's not an issue of having too low rates.
Well, that's the first part of what I'm saying. The second part is not related to the CIP. That's our operating and non-operating expenses, which are going up dramatically over a 4-year period of time, in which our total revenues are rising by about 1%.
Correct.
We've essentially have flat revenue over 4 fiscal years up and down, and our operating expenses are going up over 30, and non-operating expenses going up over 30%. I believe that the staff, starting with the general manager and working with all direct reports, needs to go through a thorough scrubbing of our expenses. That's where things are getting out of control. And as I expressed in our private meeting that the staff had with me, I'm totally supportive of adding to the engineering department to help us get projects done, and also consider outside contract engineering for projects at a greater level than we're doing right now. So it's the other areas of operation in the district that I think need some attention. I don't want to mention them here in public, but I did go through the entire administrative staff that's in the board packet tonight. And I can see areas where, I can see where we could start saving some money. But you can't see operating costs going up over 30% in 4 years and have revenue that's flat. And now we're going into a deficit every year, net of revenues and expenses. That's not the way to run a business.
Thank you. Director Akbari, did you have a comment?
Sure. So, well, first of all, I also, I heard your comments, and I hold you in high esteem and appreciate the feedback that you provided. I think I would echo a lot of the sentiments that Director Gunther shared. On the buildup of the sinking fund, I think that is a reflection of the fact that a lot of the larger projects that we have been delayed, not necessarily due to our staff, but because of permitting issues. And sitting in the engineering committee, we do get a little bit of insight into some of those delays. On your point on the operating expenses, I do actually agree with you, and I think, like Director Gunther mentioned, I probably need to dig into that a little bit more before I can properly respond to that tonight. But we'll have an opportunity to do that in next month in our next finance committee, or a finance committee, but our next board workshop. But definitely not falling on deaf ears.
So I just want to add on to what I said earlier. Definitely, we could look at ways to make ourselves more efficient in terms of our expenditures and in terms of our operations. That's a no-brainer, and we could definitely have a workshop to dive into that. In terms of the capital sinking fund, I guess I would say I feel for staff. We're an enterprise district. We're not supposed to make profits. However, we are by definition also a monopoly. trying to run an organization that would have a every year ending balance of revenue and expense to be close to zero, while predicting governmental red tapes, market conditions, human behavior, it's very difficult. I would wish to see a much lower sinking fund balance for sure. I would encourage staff to look at ways to perhaps, I wouldn't ask you to predict human behavior, but perhaps take all the projects in aggregate to say realistically, can we actually execute all these projects? Because they do pile up. So if you have 3 projects from the previous year that you cannot execute, perhaps you want to delay some of the current year projects just so that you could at least finish some of them so they don't keep on adding up. So to that end, I would encourage you to take another look because there's always ways you could take a look and do better. And Director Sethy does have a point. We're not supposed to be sitting on top of this much money, right? We're not supposed to collect it from our customer and just sit on it. So to that end, I would encourage staff to work a little bit harder, take another look. Don't just look at project individually, but look at all the projects in aggregate and have a realistic evaluation of, can we actually execute? And if we truly need to execute all these projects, what additional help do you need from the board to make this happen? Right, and the second part has to do with our expenditure and operational efficiency. I think you heard from the board, there's definitely interest to see, is there any way to make ourselves more efficient? That doesn't mean, I think you heard from the board also that it's not overall, we want you to spend less money. I think what we're saying is we want you to spend money where you should spend in terms of expenditure in order to make us a better agency. So those are my thoughts. So thank you, Director Sethy, for bringing this up. I will be supporting this budget, this amended budget, but I also have a lot to ask, and I will expect to see some of those answers come back to us.
Yeah, my own thought is it's nice to have a significant reserve. It's not every day you get an N3 opportunity that comes along, even if missed. Yeah, if there's no further comment from the board, do we have a motion for related to this item, item 5.13?
We could have always financed N3.
Yes, easily.
And since we're almost off topic, I just say I will move staff recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. There's no other comment related to the item. I don't see any member of the public raising their hands. So let us call for a roll call, please.
Director Sethy,
No.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. I have a request to take a short break for 5 minutes. We've been at this for a little over an hour, so we'll be back in, let's say 10 minutes at 7:15. Thank you. We have 5 of them. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on any item on legal and intergovernmental community affairs?
I wish to comment on item 6.1.1.
That would be it.
So I don't have any direct comments on the committee report, but I would like to add something here for board and staff knowledge. General manager is aware. So I sit on the Government Affairs Committee for the Fremont Chamber of Commerce, and at our meeting last month, at the end of last month, the executive director in charge of responsibilities for the U.S. Congress and public affairs was our guest speaker, gave a very insightful presentation. And under questions, I asked him about what was going on with the U.S. Department of Commerce on the suspension of delivery of solar panels into the United States. And he asked me to write a letter that he could, from which he could better inform his colleagues. So I prepared that letter only 2 hours after our meeting, copied our general manager on it and the rest of the chamber members. The gentleman was very kind. He responded the very next day with a response from somebody more senior in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to him about all of the proactive efforts that they're taking. And I pointed out in my letter the position that our water district is after 4 years of planning, that we have all of these moderately sized solar projects under, in the planning phase that are ready for shovel ready and implementation, but we can't move forward because our vendor doesn't have panels. And so I thought that was a very nice responsiveness that I received. And then on Monday of this week, President Biden, by executive order, suspended what his own Commerce Secretary was doing. And quite frankly, she's incompetent in her job. I listened to her testimony before Congress, and I was just appalled that this is who is representing all of commerce for the United States. And anyway, as we talked on Tuesday with Director Gunther, I think my letter had the impact of a telegram because the president responded. And so I'm happy that our solar situation is being resolved, and this ties in with the intergovernmental responsibilities that we have as a district, and I'm proud to serve on with the chamber. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Biden.
But it may be delayed given the logistics issues we're having right now. They haven't shipped anything in the last 3 or 4 months. Next is item 6.1.2, Operations and Water Quality Meeting. None. Finance meeting. Next is Engineering and Information Technology Meeting. None. And Water Resources and Conservation Meeting, May 24th. No comment. Thank you.
And I'm just looking to see if we have any comments from the public. If any member of the public wants to make any comments or ask any questions about any of those board committee reports. And I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay. Thank you. Next, go to operational reports, which begins with the investment report. Is there any?
Yeah, staff is available to answer any questions about the information that's included in the board packet, but we weren't planning on providing any separate special presentation on any of the operational reports.
A quick comment at Aqua. I had the opportunity at the JPIA to ask a question whether they had restrictions on their investments related to social or political issues, to include Russia. They apparently do have minor involvement using our former investment firm, which will hopefully be addressed. I understand that our current financial investment firm has no Russian investments. So item 6.2.2 is quarterly personnel report.
And JPIA obviously lost all their money. Those Russian funds.
Well, they have a minor amount. CalPERS has a small fraction.
Inconsequential, but they lost all their money.
Well, I don't know. They're still holding it. This was the problem.
Yeah, they're holding on to zero.
Oh, well, maybe they'll get a yacht out of it. Who knows? Okay. Thank you. So our next one then is the quarterly personnel report. Nothing, no comment.
I made my comments earlier about the personnel report, and I think that we need to take a hard look at our head count outside of engineering.
Okay. Water production report. Do we have an item to put on the screen, or?
If the board would like us to show anything in particular, we can certainly do that, or any member of the public. And I do see a hand up by Mr. Nishimura.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Please.
I guess we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the production report first. I just noticed, in addition to the fact that we are producing more water than our forecast, which is unfortunate given the drought, we are consuming considerably more SFPUC water than planned and producing less water treatment plant than planned. Is that due to some sort of operational issue, or is that due to PFAS blending requirements?
Yeah, and if I could ask Ms. Marcoux if you could show page 326, so we can all look at the same thing, board packet. And I'll ask Mr. Ahrens to provide some comments on that.
Yes, very good question. There's several reasons for the increased uses of SFPUC supplies and reduced production. If you recall, in May, the treatment plant was offline for its annual maintenance work. When that plant comes back online, there's been two factors. One, there's always a break-in period for the filters and manganese levels, so we monitor that. And this year, during the shutdown, we did a filter media exchange replacement on 3 of the filters. So there's 6 total. So half the filters were completely emptied. Some repair work was done within the filter basins themselves, and new filter material, sand and anthracite, were placed in. There was some delay in some of the materials. So 1 filter is up and running. 1 filter is being washed, because once you put the material in, you've got to backwash that several times. You scrape out the fines to get that filter up and going. And then 1 is still being filled with material being delivered by the contractor. Once those filters are brought online, it takes several weeks, if not longer, to get those filters operating correctly. They have to build up some biofilm inside them and some material to start effectively filtering. So the plant is at a reduced rate right now. I believe it's about 11 MGD. So during this time, we've been making up some of the demands using SFPUC supplies. So it's a combination of a filter production, at the treatment plant itself, and then that's causing a little increased use of San Francisco supplies. If you have any other questions, be more than happy to provide more information.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
I think we've been using the San Francisco water very successfully and blending for the reduction of hardness, ironically in an economically viable manner, as opposed to a softening plant, which was our historic alternative. So, good. Well, thank you.
I will just make one comment that's in our committee reports, just for public awareness, that our cost of water is not only going up with San Francisco, but during the pandemic right now and forward looking, our cost of chemicals is going up dramatically. It was mentioned in the staff report around 35% overall, but some of these chemicals are going up 50 to over 100%. And we are having other supply constraints, like in purchase of vehicles and other things that are going on. So we're not unaffected by the supply problems that are occurring in the rest of the economy. And our customers need to be aware of that too. And maybe it's even worth raising the profile of that, like in the newsletter that goes out to our community, in the general manager's report or somewhere else in there. That we're not unaffected by these things.
But I would note, and we're relatively better off than many of the districts in the state, including some of the Bay Area, with our groundwater reservoir being it's significantly higher than it was going into the last drought. We had drawn it down to work on rubber dams and fish ladders. And second, our semi-tropic reserves hold at almost a 13-year reserve, 120,000 plus acre feet. And San Francisco has the 5 years in supply in their local storage in the San Francisco Bay Area, given their size of their reservoirs. So fortunately, we're not in crisis. And there are other parts of the state that are running into difficulties. But let me take a moment to talk also, maybe rather debate this. The total water supply and conservation for the water supply of the state has been identified as being as high as 100 million acre feet. Municipal and industrial is only about less than 9 million acre feet. A 20% reduction therefore is less than 2% of the available state water. We're going through massive changes and angst and publicity to chase 2% of the state's water. We're willing to pay $3,000 to $4,000 an acre foot for that water in most municipalities, 100 times more than ag. So in a rational economic world, we don't have a crisis in the municipal and industrial world. And yet
I'm in total agreement.
we,
Absolutely, 100%.
but the publicity and the angst and our budgets, because they're not in sync with our variables and fixed costs, are wildly fluctuating. You can't do a budget in that environment and have any real confidence.
And we do have a drought update presentation coming up, and we can
Okay.
talk some more about drought-related issues then.
So that's fine. That's my rant. Thank you.
I will just add to that, that you've got, especially at the last Aqua meeting, we have board members across the state in public office elected that are giving all this conservation happy talk, as I call it. Conservation happy talk that produces nothing. We're not getting to the core issue of where we need to save water. That's a major problem. And so no one wants to talk about the elephant in the room. Leave it then.
Thank you. The age-old problems of water. Thank you. All right, our next item then is we've completed the, is there any comment then related to any of the other items of water production or distribution system monthly hardness map? We then go to.
I do see a hand up from
Another
Mr.
hand up,
Bishmore.
please. Yes.
Yeah, I was
Mr.
just going to
Kennedy.
comment. Yes, I was just going to comment that I do note that the hardness is starting to creep up. And it's over the target of 150 in the northern section of the district. I guess I have one question, which is, and I'm speculating that the hardness was taken on a day where the water system was harder than the average, because I'm looking at the table in the upper left-hand corner of the report, and it says that the average hardness coming out of the blending facility is 136, and out of the treatment plant is 115. So mathematically, I find it hard to believe, or I don't understand how one could have a reading over 150 if the average, the hardest water coming into the system is 136. But I suspect that's just due to the date that the samples were taken. Is there something else that's going on that isn't clear from this map, or is that what happened? Is that the sampling was just taken on the day that the water was particularly hard?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know that those samples are collected on different days and there's different timing issues, but if Mr. Ahrens has any comments, maybe we can shed a little light.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the high levels. I think most of the levels are below 150 because of that. I can't see specifically, but yeah, there's always a little variation between the average plant hardness, which is taken over a month, versus individual readings. But I think for the most part, levels are fairly low, partially because of the low production at TP2. Again, the blender is producing water, but we're blending for PFAS, so it's naturally going to be below the normal 150 target.
Okay, thanks.
I don't have any specific.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Take liberty of making a quick comment that identifies the importance of our San Francisco water supply. Single-digit parts per million in hardness, as it means to reduce the overall hardness. And threats to that San Francisco water supply with the unimpaired flows in the San Joaquin Valley. And in my mind, some that incredulous is a systemic replacement of that supply with sewage. But we'll discuss that in part later in this agenda. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions on any of the operational reports, we can move on to item 6.3, staff presentations.
Okay.
And we have two presentations this evening. Both will be introduced by our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Laura Heides. And so I'll ask her to please start out with the drought update.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. As the drought continues and we head into summertime, staff wanted to provide an update on the latest conditions and state updates, as well as the activities the district is undertaking to support and encourage customers to reduce their water use and achieve drought savings targets. I'll note that the title slide lists Giselle Delgadillo, Water Use Efficiency Specialist, as our presenter tonight, but unfortunately she isn't able to be here, so I'll be covering this item. Next slide, please. To date, the total precipitation for water year 21-22 remains at 13.6 inches and ranks 39th driest so far. Next slide, please. Severe to exceptional drought conditions continue to persist throughout the state. Many of the state's reservoirs are at lower than typical levels as we enter the summer months, including Oroville Reservoir, which serves the State Water Project and was at 53% of capacity and 68% of the historical average for this time as of midnight last night. And you'll see the graph on the slide is from last week. So this is the most updated information. San Luis Reservoir, which is also key to making deliveries on the State Water Project, also remains at 44% of capacity and 67% of average to date. Next slide, please. There are just a few updates on the district's water supplies this month. San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, or SFPUC, moved to a level 2 water shortage and adopted a system-wide water use reduction target of 11%. The SFPUC approved this change on May 24th in response to emergency regulations adopted by the State Water Resources Control Board. This results in a 16% cutback to wholesale customers collectively, while SFPUC retail remains at 5% cutback under the Tier 1 plan. For the Department of Water Resources State Water Project imports, there are no changes here as State Water Project allocations remain steady at 5% Table A allocation of new water supplies, and ACWD remains maintains full contractual access to semi-tropic storage supplies this year. For local supplies, our local groundwater levels remain actively managed and are currently trending at levels near this time last year. As an update on dry year transfer opportunities, unfortunately, the dry year transfer program through the state water contractors has not yielded any significant new supplies for ACWD, as this year looked much like last year for total volumes available ACWD. So it did not make sense. It did not make financial sense to participate at that level. For the second transfer opportunity with Contra Costa Water District, unfortunately, it looks like water will not be available for a transfer this year, although staff will continue to explore the possibility of this transfer concept for next year. Next slide, please. On May 24th, 2022, State Water, and this is the statewide actions updates, mostly focusing on May 24th, 2022, State Water Resources Control Board adopted emergency regulations requiring submission of preliminary water supply and demand assessments by June 1st, 2022, which staff has completed. They also require adoption of stage 2 water shortage level response actions by all agencies by June 10th, 2022, which has already been covered here at the district through our drought actions in this past December. The state board's action includes a ban on the irrigation of non-functional turf in non-residential sites, but also includes HOA common areas and is expected to take effect June 10th, 2022. The action also includes a definition of non-functional turf that is solely ornamental and not regularly used for human recreational purposes or for civic or community events. So there's more information that's going to be coming out about these non-functional turf requirements. The state is developing some frequently asked questions, so we're keeping an eye out for that, and staff will be evaluating this information to better understand how the regulations will be applied so that we can get the word out and work with our customers to comply with these new requirements. Also on statewide actions just this week, since these slides have been published, on Tuesday, the State Water Resources Control Board imposed some water rights curtailments in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta watershed. So we're awaiting more information about if or how that may impact the district's imported supplies given current conditions. To date, we understand that supplies on the SFPUC system are healthy, so we don't expect any immediate impacts. And we'll wait to hear more about that soon. Next slide, please. So to orient you to this graphic, orange is the 2020 demand pattern, red is the 2021 demand pattern, and purple dashed line is the target pattern that we're trying to achieve this year to meet our overall 15% goal. The 2022 water demand by our customers is in blue, and monthly water demands for May were at about 38 MGD. And I'm happy to report that's below the 2020 and 2021 demands for May, but still a little bit above our target for the month that we were looking to. In the past week, though, we have seen water demands trending about 10 to 15% below what we normally expect to see for this time of year, given the weather and other variables that we take into account. So we're hopeful that we will continue to see the trend toward our monthly water savings target as the summer ramps up, especially as more of our summer outreach efforts start to reach our customers even further. Next slide, please. So this is the graphic we've been looking at each month of water use efficiency activity, weekly activity that we're seeing from customers. And you'll see that May has continued to see a healthy interest from our customers in a variety of our services, including calls and emails to the hotline, water waste reports, water conservation kits, and interest in some of our programs. Next slide, please. We had a lot of outreach activities happening, both in concert between the water use efficiency and the public affairs teams. So what we've completed to date, some of the things are emails regarding drought restrictions and state actions to dedicated landscape customers via the water fluent system that we use. We've sent letters to homeowners associations and multifamily residential complexes. We've prepared revised conservation tip sheets for all customer classes to reflect the new developments that are happening with the drought requirements. We've done some flyer distribution actually to businesses and residents that have requested that information. And we recently awarded some Business of the Year awards and made recognition of those folks for their water efficient dedicated landscape customers that have really achieved great savings this year. And we've also, in our acknowledgement, encouraged them to continue saving even more this coming year, given the drought. So you can view all those awards on our website if you're interested in seeing the details. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is the upcoming outreach. And I should also note, besides the things that are listed on the previous slide that are included here today, there's also a number of things you'll see if you review the materials from the LICA committee about all of the other variety of outreach and different venues that we're putting our drought messaging in as well. So I don't have those listed on the slide here, but definitely a lot more going on. Outreach upcoming, we have a summer aqueduct newsletter article coming out on the restrictions. We're going to be doing a website revamp to include additional messaging and customer specific sections with relevant resources. We're going to be doing a drought message using our RANS emergency notification system, and we anticipate that will be in about a week. So we hope that will definitely get customers' attention. We'll be preparing a postcard to all customers with information on summer irrigation restrictions. We are also using some focus groups here internally to inform our strategy for outreach. We do have some folks that live in the service area and appreciate their feedback. We're also looking to potentially target the highest landscape water users via the water fluent system, potentially leverage the high frequency AMI consumption data that we're starting to gather to identify irrigation patterns and better understand what our customers are doing. And also the water use efficiency team is coordinating regularly with public affairs to develop and execute a summer outreach plan. And next up, thanks, Ms. Marcoux. We have a number of community events that have happened during May. I won't read these all since they're listed here on the slide. But I will note we do have a couple more events coming up in the near term. This weekend on the 12th, we have Assemblymember Alex Lee's Town Hall, where we will be sharing information on our rebates and programs that customers can take advantage of. And then we have an upcoming landscape workshop that will be at a date to be scheduled. So it's been a busy month of events this past month, you can see, and more to come, I'm sure, as the summer progresses. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions. That's kind of a high flyover. Been a busy time, and I'm thankful to the team for keeping it all going.
Thank you. Is it there,
I have a question and some comments, if I may.
please?
I'll defer to any other board member first. Okay, so Ms. Heides, what is our best theory as to why we are not meeting the level of conservation that we saw in the last drought, where we essentially had a flat curve through the summer in 2015?
Right.
That was a super achievement, and we're not anywhere close to that right now. So what is our best theory as to what is going on in the community?
This is a very good question. And I was actually really encouraged to see where we landed in May and kind of where we're going currently. I'm really hopeful if people don't ramp up too much, we will start to see that flat line. We have a number of theories. There's folks that think some of it is sort of disaster fatigue between the last drought and COVID and other political events in the world, that there's just a lot of fatigue, and it's just hard for people to get their mind around conserving water on top of everything else. There's also, been some changes in dynamics of the water use in our area, with people more working from home, growing gardens, like doing different things than they were a few years ago. So, but we've also had just a late breaking discussion about what some of our internal focus groups folks think around what they hear from friends and neighbors in the community, that maybe there's also a piece that's around sort of drought fatigue, that people don't necessarily understand the difference between the last drought and this drought and what's different, what's more extreme, or maybe don't recognize that it's quite extreme this time around. So long story short, I don't think we really know. A lot of it might be psychology to some extent, and some of it science. So I'm hoping over the next month or two, we'll really start to see where the trend is going with our additional outreach and get to where we need to be.
Personally, I think a lot of it has to do with the change of governors. Governor Brown put down mandatory restrictions on water usage, and this governor is very hesitant to do it for whatever reason. I have two comments. First, I take the back roads to Silicon Valley and back where I live, and I follow the freeway back on Fremont Boulevard to Warren. And I see that a lot of the industrial turf that's out there, everything's green and plush. I see the sprinklers going a lot. I even came back from the gym at Bay Club the other night on Warren, and the sprinklers were going on all these lawns right across the street. And I'm wondering what in the world is going on. People need to be better informed. That's a major area of savings for all of California, is the non-essential turf. So I hope we can get the message out. And then, as I mentioned to our general manager and Director Weed, I came up with some of my own public service announcements that I sent to the governor. May I share them quickly?
Oh, you mean some ideas that you had?
Yeah. So these are very quick. So I'm asking the governor to put on some celebrity PSAs that go across California, and he needs to employ both former Governor Brown and former Governor Schwarzenegger. So the first is, Governor Brown goes into his spiel about, we've been in a drought for 7 of the last 10 years, and you remember me when in the last drought, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, shows a green lawn and then a brown lawn, and he says, be brave, go Brown. A double entendre on his name, right? Second one is Schwarzenegger comes on television and says, I'm back, Californians, to talk to you about how to go to native California turf in your yards. And then shows the same thing, a green lawn converted to native Californian, and he says, hasta la vista to that old lawn that you had. And the third one is the governor's own wife with her children. And she says, most of you Californians don't know who I am, but I am the First Lady of California. And then she goes into her spiel too, and then she has a cute little ending with the kids all championing, save water and everything. So I'm hoping to get a letter back from the governor. We'll see what he does. Thank you
All
for
right.
permitting that.
Actually,
Thank you.
Short entertainment.
Do we have other comments from board members?
yeah,
please?
if I can just build off of the question from Director Sethy. Do we know what we can attribute the major water savings from 2015's drought? And I guess the theory that I'm positing is that our customers were able to tackle a lot of the low-hanging fruit of replacing their lawns or converting to a more drought-tolerant front yard or backyard. They were replacing their toilets and their taps and with more water efficient features. And then those were already accomplished in the last drought. We were able to see a pretty significant savings because of that in a very short period of time, and that this time around they might not know what else to tackle. Do we have any data that we can point to say, well, we kind of tackled the low-hanging fruit last time, and that's why we're having a little bit more trouble with the messaging this time, that people just don't know where else to look to conserve? That's, I don't know if you can kind of respond to that a little
Well,
bit.
wouldn't they be saving the same amount as they did back in 2015?
As in, we're asking them to save more than, like, we created a new baseline, and we're asking them to now save more than where they were previously.
But they were saving a certain level in 2015, and we're well above that now.
So that's what I'm trying to
That's the
figure.
problem.
I guess that's my,
There's a big delta there.
so that's maybe my question.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely seeing a fair amount of what I think you're describing as demand hardening. People have made changes and haven't necessarily gone back. I don't know that we have any specific data I could quote right off the top of my head, but when we did do our water efficiency master plan, we did a survey and did look at saturation of, have folks change out their toilets and washers, and a lot of that has been done. And we do see that we don't have a lot of the older appliances and those sorts of things left. We have had a fair amount of lawn conversion as well. I do remember in 2015, we had a lot of dead lawns around town too. One other interesting thing in looking back at that survey from the Water Efficiency Master Plan, a pretty big percentage, like I want to say it was in the realm of 80% of folks said they had continued saving water since the last drought. And then when we asked a follow-up question of, could you do more? It was a much lower percentage of folks who reported in the survey that they felt they could still do even a little bit more. So I think there is some of that. Folks maybe don't know what to do or have done the easy things. So that's where I think we're really going to have a big push to get more lawns out, more, more folks doing things that maybe aren't as easy as the low-hanging fruit.
I just add one thing to that too, and that is we have 5,000 more service connections now than we did during the last drought. And so it's really not as practical to get down to those levels because we've got 5,000 more connections and those people need to use some water too.
Yes, thanks, Tom.
Okay. Oh, do we have other comments from members of the board?
I'll just quickly comment. I really think December had a big factor. December, the rains, we don't normally get a big December. We got a great December. We had that October, and it set a tone that everything's okay. And nobody noticed. Didn't rain in January, didn't rain in February, barely rained in March. So whether that's granted, that was great that it did that in December. It spared us an absolute disaster. But I think that threw things off. Now that said, I was out in Fresno and couldn't believe what I saw. I'm walking along. The first thing it was a shock was that my brother-in-law has AMI. 10 years ago, he didn't have a meter. But Fresno went in and they jumped right to AMI, and he got a letter that said he was using too much water. Impact, he stopped doing it. But I don't know what his neighbors are doing, because we're walking around the neighborhoods. Every night there was water running down the gutters. Every night. And I don't think these were pools being empty. You know, so I don't see that here. Maybe I'm not seeing it the roads that I'm driving on, or seeing it around Union City where we walk, but almost every other street down there was water coming down the gutter. And they have AMI. They are sending letters out. I don't know what the impact is over in Fresno. Obviously, they're their own group. It did impact my in-laws. I mean, he was like, whoa. And I was a little shocked to hear he had AMI. But I was happy to hear it. I was also happy to hear the results of that letter to him and his reaction. They also approved his drought tolerant front lawn, or lack thereof. But still, it was very surprising to see the amount of water being wasted out in Fresno. It was disappointing. And so I would say from what I saw out there, what I'm seeing up around Unions, I don't see the same thing going on. It was almost every other street.
That's a place in the state where you see all the signs up that say, no fish, more dams.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're building more houses.
All right, thank you. Other comments from members of the board?
I guess, are we offering theories now? So I would say that I would postulate that the segment of our customers who are much more willing to conserve water to help us out, they have already done their best. They have switched out their fixture. They have changed to a more drought tolerant garden. I think our problem is that there is a segment of our customers who really are wedded to that lawn. I think during one of our hearing, we had a customer came by that in this forum told us that he has a double lot and he doesn't care how much we're charging. His lawn needs to be green. So now the question for us is, how do we tackle customers like that who has the financial ability to pay our stage rate and insist their lawn needs to be green? I mean, the difficulty is for staff to figure out the messaging, right? And I also just happened to, a house in my neighborhood is for sale. And a couple months before that, they started a rental, like usual, painting the house and all that. And part of that process is putting a really pretty green lawn because that's associated with their property value, right? And that takes a lot of water. So there are niche areas perhaps we can target, but I am not quite sure if that would worth our effort in terms of water saving. But perhaps what we need to do is think about slightly different messaging to target the people who, or maybe we really need a stick along with a carrot to target people who really just say, I don't really care that we're in a drought, that I just need my green lawn. Right. And that's going to be a very difficult message to deliver. But one day we might need to end up there, just say, hey, you know what? We're in a drought. The district is going to face a penalty if we don't reach this target. You need to help us out one way or another. We might need to go there. I don't know.
If I could build on your comments, Director Huang, I think that one of the things that staff needs to take a look at on this subject is whether we need to go to stage 3 on our drought messaging and rates. And I would suggest that in the last drought, what happened was we sent a very serious price signal to our customers about the cost of extra water. And it's been marginal at stage 2 right now, but it was much more severe in 2015 and between 2013 and 15. Governor Brown, with his mandatory executive orders, put severe penalties on water districts if they did not comply. And so that messaging that came from the governor's office plus our own price signals to our ratepayers really had an impact. I think all of that dovetails into why we had so much savings a few years back.
So I'm just going to say that be very careful with that messaging. My family is actually in the bucket that we are extremely efficient. I think last time I looked at it, our bi-monthly bill, we used about 7 units. They're literally, in order to save 15%, they're literally telling me I should not take a shower every day and stop flushing my toilet. That's going to be pretty hard. My lawn is dead.
Okay.
So I think we need to tailor our message to be a little bit more understanding of people who try really hard and they have done their very best. Because at some point, we need to talk about the minimum amount of water needed for health, right? To protect public health. So just remember that.
Oh,
Yes, so
you know,
I just wanted to add a quick comment on
Please.
the price signal. In March and April, customer bills were prorated with the stage rate. So it wasn't until May that customers received the full bill impact of the stage rate. So definitely I'll be curious to see what happens the next few months to see if there's some adjustment. And like Ms. Heides was talking about, the curve kind of flattens through the summer once customers see that full effect.
you know, thank you. It amazes me how to short our memories and how we are to what happened in the last couple of droughts, going all the way back to the 1970s. We had a former general manager got national publicity begging people to start using water because our revenues had plunged. We went through that in each case. Conservation is not based on rates. There's no demonstrated effort that shows that rates drive conservation. Our rates are there, and our rate surcharge that we did in the last drought was there to cover a partially cover a $60 million deficit in our revenues from what we had planned. And a portion of that, $12.5 million, was done with a rate surcharge. We did a part of a study that showed those communities with tiered rates and those without had the same level of conservation. In this case, we have staged rates which are not there for conservation, but they're there to make up for lost revenue. If our conservation kicks in, we're going to need that 60% rate increase to cover the lost revenue because we don't match our rate structure is out of sync with our operations. So, and the next, we have water. We have, in this case, we should be looking at the marketability of some of our water reserves. 120,000 acre feet at semi-tropic. Our need is 10,000 acre feet a year. We found another 18,000 acre feet in the operation of Del Val this winter, equal to what we're proposing to buy for $100 million at Los Vaqueros. There may well be those who need water. We're in a position to market some of our resources and make a significant financial return. We're completely out of touch when you get into these, as you mentioned earlier, the people who banter their comments about drought and the impact. We do not have a drought emergency in ACWD. That's my take. Thank you. Okay.
All right, unless there are other questions or comments, I'm not seeing anything from the public.
Thank you for that very fine presentation, Ms. Heides. You see the vigorous discussion that you.
It's quite a hot topic these days. And I do now see a hand up from Mr. Nishimura.
Yes, and then please.
Yes.
It's easier for me to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm looking at the demand tracking graph and taking into account, I can't remember which gentleman said that we do have roughly 7,000 more connections. You know, that's almost 10% increase. So, you know, it does look like our consumption is roughly tracking the corrected 2015 consumption, except for starting in May, it's starting to diverge. You know, so I do concur with the concern that's been raised. Whether or not we are going to, actually follow the 2015 demand curve corrected for the increased connections, or whether we're going to diverge and actually consume more on a per connection basis. In terms of, we heard some anecdotal stories about water running down the gutters. I think one area where we do need to ensure is that our municipalities don't also waste water. I believe it was not that long ago that these sidewalks, I noticed that the sidewalks near the Fremont Water Park were wet due to irrigation of that lawn. So again, it's all part of the messaging that the public sees. Lastly, I noticed in the presentation that there was the potential data source, the high frequency AMI data source. That's a double-edged sword. Yes, it's an interesting way of collecting data, and you can sort of infer from the high frequency data of what the irrigation patterns are for that account. I do know, having looked at some anecdotal evidence from that's available on the internet, that one needs to be extremely careful in how one uses that data. Yes, it is a source of data to infer a particular account's behavior. On the other hand, if used in a punitive or perhaps in a improper or a perceived to be improper way, it can poison the well of the customer acceptance of AMI. And I just wanted to bring that up to the board to make sure that if that data source is going to be used, particularly as an enforcement mechanism, that one thinks very carefully about the overall public perception and how the public's perception of AMI could be tainted. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, fine. That then I believe concludes the issue of route update. And we can now move on to item 6.3.2, Regional Purified Water Pilot Project Collaboration.
Collaboration, yeah, that's right. Of course, we are always looking at what the future might look like and evaluating our options for augmenting water supplies in the future and dealing with changing hydrology and so forth. And so, to introduce this topic, I'll turn it over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Heides.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. This item is something that staff has been working on in collaboration with Dublin San Ramon Services District and other regional partners to explore a new concept in the realm of water reuse. I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Jan Lee, Assistant General Manager of Dublin San Ramon Services District, who has joined us remotely tonight in support of this item and brings a wealth of knowledge about wastewater treatment and reuse to this partnership. I'm also pleased to introduce Ms. Kelsey Oshiro, Water Resources Engineer here at ACWD, who is the district's lead on water reuse projects and will be making this presentation. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Oshiro to begin with the slides.
Great, thank you, Ms. Heides. Good evening, and yes, so I'm giving an update and an overview of this Regional Purified Water project. And so before we jump in, just wanted to present this slide for commonly used acronyms and abbreviations that we may say throughout the presentation, or you may see in the presentation itself. Next slide, please. And so the general background of this project is that ACWD, we have been participating in this regional purified water study that's being led by DSRSD, as Ms. Heides mentioned, and regional partners currently include LAVMA, or Livermore Amador Valley Water Management Agency, the City of Livermore, Zone 7 Agency, Zone 7 Water Agency, or Zone 7, and Union Sanitary District, or USD. And so this is a highly feasible concept that's from numerous studies that include DSRC and ACWD, throughout the Tri-Valley and Tri-City areas. And we'll dive into that in a little more detail further in the presentation. And next slide, thank you. So here is an overview of the Regional Purified Water Pilot concept. And so you see up at top up at the top of the page, you'll see that the treatment process. And so this is a small temporary advanced treatment system at Lavma. And so you'll get the treated wastewater, which will go through the membrane filtration, reverse osmosis, and then ultraviolet light and advanced oxidation, which would then produce your purified water that would be discharged into Alamo Creek, here in the figure to your right at Lavma, and it would go down and flow into Alameda Creek, which would be a supplemental flow, and we could divert that flow downstream for groundwater recharge. And so this pilot would produce up to 0.2 million gallons per day of purified water. Next slide, please. And so this slide highlights several benefits of this pilot project and similar systems. And to the right, you'll see a couple of photos of another demonstration facility. And from this pilot project, we will see great benefit in the public outreach and education, which we'll go into a little bit more detail further in the presentation. It'll also demonstrate purified water technology and allow for additional data collection, which would be beneficial for ACWD as well as our regional partners and agencies, which leads us to also benefiting our regional collaboration currently and going forward. And this pilot will also leverage existing infrastructure as well. And next slide, please. So here is the cost estimate for capital and operation and maintenance costs. And so this slide here is the overall cost for the pilot and not just ACWD shares. So the capital cost estimate comes in at about 2.3 million. And the O&M cost over 2 years of operation is 340,000, which brings you to a total estimate for a tier pilot at 2.7 million. And next slide, please. And so as previously mentioned, this pilot will complement other regional efforts that have been completed previously and that's going on currently. And you'll see this Venn diagram to the left. We're right in that dark blue region for the regional purified water pilot. Thank you. And you'll see that the efforts from the Tri-City studies as well as the Tri-Valley studies in combination with other interested stakeholders all pulled together to put together this regional purified water pilot project. And as mentioned before, you'll see here listed too that our other potential pilot project partners include City of Livermore, Lavma, Zone 7, DSRSD, and USD. So a great collaboration effort, both in Tri-City and Tri-Valley areas. And so here we're at next steps, and I will actually pass this over to Ms. Heides.
Thank you, Ms. Oshiro. So as part of tonight's update, we wanted to give the board a sense of what staff's next steps are on this project collaboration. We'll be working with the regional partners to develop a memorandum of agreement for further collaboration, which would come to the board for consideration later this year, once that agreement would be developed. It's estimated that the cost would be around $25,000 per agency, plus some staff time to dedicate to collaboration activities. And a near-term focus of the effort would be to develop public outreach and education materials that can be used by all of the partners. And that's something that we think is going to be a great benefit for us and for others. Additionally, the collaboration would work to further refine the pilot concept and pursue outside sources of funding for the project, and if feasible, complete CEQA requirements and actually implement the pilot concept. And so before we wrap up, because public outreach is really such a big part of what's next and something that we are really focusing on and think is going to be a great benefit to the district and others, I will turn it back over to Ms. Oshiro to provide additional information about what's envisioned in developing the outreach effort for this project.
Great, thank you,
So
Ms.
next slide.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so as Ms. Heides has mentioned, the public outreach and education component will be a huge benefit to this project. And so what this pilot will allow for, we'll be able to identify the stakeholders, and we'll also be able to collect data through surveys and focus groups, and just get feedback on how stakeholders are feeling about the purified water pilot and generally. And we'll also be able to develop an outreach strategy, which will identify various goals and objectives, definitely work on messaging, and look at our timeline. And so this pilot would also allow for public tours and other interactive public outreach components. And so all very exciting efforts, and will definitely be a great learning opportunity, and really pushing the public outreach and education component of purified water. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your time and take any questions you may have.
Please, Director Sethy.
Thank you for a nice presentation here. I'm sorry if I'm going to prick a pin into the balloon here, but I fail to see what the collaborative benefits are of this project. I can see where ACWD is the recipient of purified water downstream. That's a benefit. Is DSRSD going to sell that water to us at a certain price? Is that what the a component is here? If you are so we have two committed partners here between two different agencies. We have prospective partners that could collaborate on the project, but I fail to see what the benefit is to any one of them that you have on the prospective list. So I'm curious as to what you can offer in terms of who benefits and how from this project.
Director Sethy, that's a great question. And we really focused here today on the benefits to the district. There are definitely some wider benefits to the variety of agencies that are looking at participating, because this purified water concept could be expanded in a number of ways. And actually, we do have Jan Lee on the line, I believe. And so maybe, Ms. Lee, if you'd be willing to share a little bit of DSRSD's perspective about the benefits of the project, maybe would that help, Director Sethy?
Sure, yeah.
Great. Ms. Lee, are you there?
I am. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good evening, President Weed and members of the board. Thank you for letting me join you this evening. And I'm happy, Director Sethy, to try and address your question. So specific to the pilot, part of it is there's a number of studies going on in both the Tri-City region and the Tri-Valley region. And whether or not this pilot scales up to be a long-term arrangement between DSRSD and ACWD, I think remains to be seen. But one of the things what we're trying to test, one of the challenges with purified water projects is public acceptance. And what we find is that these pilot projects or demonstration projects are a good way to help understand and educate the public. And so it would provide some additional information and would be a data point so that if we do look at long-term opportunities and those questions that you're asking about benefits, one option could be maybe a scaled up project, including DSRSD and ACWD, and also including Zone 7 with some type of exchange. There are some studies, I think, that the Tri-City is looking at that involve purified water. This could help inform those studies. And there are also studies that are in the Tri-Valley that it can inform and what could inform as well. So I think today the focus is really just on this public outreach and the pilot project. But your question of sort of the scalability and the long-term benefits, I think that's something that still needs to be explored between the partner agencies.
All right, do we have other comments by members of the board?
I think I'm just going to add my 2 cents. So I had the pleasure of discussing this in committee. So I'm definitely personally in support of this project. I think benefit for ACWD. We do have a recycle project. I know the board is not unanimously in support of it, But this is also a data point to see if we could use recycled water instead of building a very expensive pipeline from Union Sand to Quarry Lake, which is our latest concept, right? Is it potential? Can we potentially, for example, get recycled water through the creek, which is a lot cheaper than building a pipeline, and get it from DSRSD? Right? Those are different scenarios, different possibilities that we could get our data point to see, is that potentially a new source of supply for us? Right, that's something that we're definitely always be looking at. This is a pilot, currently it's a nominal cost. And I think we're also looking, the group is looking for outside funding. So I think in a sense, as a pilot, this is a very cheap way to get our data points to kind of inform what do we want to do with recycled water in the future? Is there a cheaper way to do this? Or is it still too expensive for us to afford, which is currently what it says right now, right? So this is just a data point. It's actually a very interesting concept for us to use to get recycled water. This is indirect potable reuse, which is a concept that we talked about as a board by putting water into quarry lakes. It would also be good for the board to understand the sentiment of our customers about purified water, right? The worst thing would be possible would be we try to work on this pilot and we got the feedback that our customers think this is toilet to tap and it's just not going to fly. Then I think as a board, we really think about recycled water in the future, right? So this is just a pilot that gathered a lot of useful data points for us to think about our future and recycle water.
All right, thank you. Other members? All right, and let me make my comments. The district is at risk of losing any credibility it has for a rational investment of public funds. This is releasing water, small amount in a pilot project, into an open channel, some 15 to 20 miles north outside the district, to be put on a continuing basis. That's one of the major problems with recycled water. You don't turn it on and off. It keeps coming. As of today, we are not capturing water. Much of the year, we don't. When we do capture it and put it into the groundwater basin, our staff in the past has suggested we're only going to recover 30% of it. The actual cost per acre foot is incomprehensibly high. Even coming out of the plant, it appears to be at least $5,000 an acre foot. The technology is well known for purified water, so there's no technology issue here of creating technology. There is no connection. Now, if someone can put water directly into a system, that would be zone 7. They might be able to benefit from this. We don't. We have no benefit. To contribute next, the water they're putting into the system is warm. It doesn't help fish. Now that really is almost irrelevant since the northern part of the Alameda Creek Reservoir water basin is too warm to support ocean-going fish to begin with. Zone 7 built fish ladders that have never seen a fish and never will because the water is so warm, and they've done their own studies. We're adding to warm water, we're adding warmer water. So it's not fish to help. The cost, there's no real measurable water coming to us in this. And suggest that there's a pilot program that we're going to get public acceptance to that's well outside of our district boundaries, I think is quixotic at best. I would hope we'd kill this project and pull out of the pilot project. We had another experience with a pilot project, which I bought into, and that was ultrafiltration. Oh, it's just a pilot. We ended up spending $30 million, taking a $13 million write-off in our assets for a project before we finally got around to pulling the plug. And if the PR pitch to the public is we're going to waste money on a project outside the district on an incredibly expensive theme and replace our other water with treated sewage, I think we'd lose credibility. I'd have a hard time supporting people who would support this concept.
So Director, we do respect, we had this discussion in committee, right? And you brought out some really good questions in terms of how much water we could recover But remember, in this pilot project, the assumption is 1-to-1. For every drop of water that go into the creek, we get to retrieve 1 drop. That is the pilot. If I remember correctly, because we did ask staff that question in committee, right? How much water can we get back? So it's just a demonstration. There is no commitment to say we are buying this water. In fact, we're not even sure if it's possible with DSRS to even sell us that water. Right, so it really is a demonstration of concept in terms of acceptance. I mean, we want to know, can we even do this, right? That's the question we're trying to answer at a very fixed cost.
Oh,
Do we scale up or not? That's a totally different discussion. I will tell you, I support a pilot without seeing the data. I'm not going to tell you right now, I will support the expanded project if there is one, right? Make decision based on data, on facts. In terms of customer survey and customer sentiment. Yes, the project is not within our district, but we could ask our customers saying, hey, we're taking this water, we're putting in quarry lakes. How do you feel about that? That is a perfectly legitimate question, and I would anticipate those would be the type of questions staff would be asking in terms of the survey and the public opinion. We are not just going to survey people who live out in Dublin, San Ramon. So we will have useful data. It will tell us where we should go in the future.
It was mentioned $25,000. I understand in the CIP for this year, we have $253,000 designated for this project. That's not 25,000. Next,
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's this year. Director Weed, I know it is in 1 year. The 25,000 that was shown on the slide, that has to do with our participation in the sort of demonstration and public relation component. That's going to be part of the early stage of the pilot. In terms of constructing the facility and so forth, that would be a different expenditure later.
okay. Next, there is one issue of potential liability with recycled water, and not only impacts this, but also our discussion with Dublin Center, with Union Sanitary District. And it was brought to my attention at the last Aqua conference, talking to Edgar Dimely, who's chair of the AWWA Water Quality Committee, and even with Daniel McIntyre, general manager of Dublin San Ramon. Traditional wastewater treatment projects and processes create PFAS. There is a proposed suggestion that PFAS are going to be declared a hazardous waste. It's a concern to the industry. EPA is developing some guidelines that are due out this winter. But if you're involved in a project that creates PFAS and you have to take the brine from the treatment process and take it to a hazardous waste site, Class A site, probably trucking it, that's an extraordinary cost. So given the issues relating to the incredible lack of reasonable connection between this location for the treated water, Dublin San Ramon, so we'd get pitifully no measurable water, even in the full operation. The cost, and now I would suggest that we also be wary of the legal liability of getting involved in any recycled water program.
So
Thank you.
we kind of talked about this too, right, in committee. So part of the
Are you
pilot
on the same
process.
committee?
Yes, we're on.
Yes.
Were you talking to each other?
Yes, and that question has been answered by staff. Part of the treatment system is reverse osmosis, which is effective in removing PFAS.
It will not be water that is the product water. It will be the brine.
And the
The brine
second,
is where you're concentrating the PFAS.
and the second point is that you mentioned fish. The purpose of this pilot project is not to support fish passage. It really is to demonstrate the ability for us to pick up water. So that, I think those are just the factual statement I want to make. I think this is kind of long and drawn out. As you can see, we had a lot of discussion in committee and there were a lot of questions asked of staff. Staff has answered my questions satisfactory. So thank you very much for the discussion.
I have a question and some
Please.
comments. First, in the foreseeable future, are we going to be asked to make a investment decision on this pilot project?
Good question. I can answer that. We won't be asking you to make a capital investment in building the pilot plant right at this time. What we would be asking for when we go for the memorandum of agreement would be on the order of the $25,000 contribution towards additional outreach and planning for a pilot project. The capital costs that you saw that Ms. Oshiro presented, those would be to actually implement and operate the pilot for a couple of years. And those costs are not what are being asked for at this time. And that would be a future discussion as to how that's funded, perhaps through grant funding and other sources. And so that is not what we would be asking for in the immediate future. Does that help put it in perspective?
Well, when would we have to make some kind of board decision as to whether we want to move forward with this?
With the memorandum of agreement to continue looking at it or with actually
yeah.
implementing?
Yes.
We're thinking later this year would be the memorandum of agreement coming to the board and finalizing that collaboration.
Okay. So I'm going to keep an open mind on this subject because I would really like to learn more. So I'm looking forward to not only our own staff, but the staff at DSRSD to help me better understand a few things. One, I really want to understand how the other potential partners could potentially benefit from this, let's say, a sustainable system at some point. Is there water being received by Zone 7 or Livermore? I mean, who actually benefits here, aside from us? And what is the cost of that water secondarily? Next, I would suggest that, and I've talked to Mr. McIntyre quite a number of times over the last decade. We have DSRSD has done multiple surveys on their communities already about recycled water and purified water. And there's a certain trend that is apparent over a decade from those surveys that people are becoming more and more accepting of this concept, right? And then number two, we have multiple demonstrations of this already going on in California. We have one right here in North San Jose between the sewage plant and the water purification plant. And they're repumping that water down into the groundwater system. Oh, and they're also selling it to the high-tech companies that have these huge server farms to cool their servers down. So it's a coolant that they're selling as well for a very profitable price, the Silicon Valley. Number two, we have the water purification plant down in Monterey, which is huge. And then we have Orange County, which has the largest in the state. And we have lots of survey data already available from these communities. I think the one in Orange County is maybe up to 10 MGD a day right now, and they're planning on doing 100 million. And there's videos on their website to watch about that whole water purification process between the sewer district, sanitation district, and the regional water district. So we've got plenty of data, and the trends are all the same in all these communities around California, that people are more and more in favor of this as they begin to understand better the technology that's involved. And remember, this started with the Apollo program in the 1960s. This is not new science. This is provable science. So I'm a little, I don't know, queasy when it comes to trying to push a project just to get more public data and input when we have plenty of it available right now. So I'll leave my comments at that, but I'll keep an open mind.
Let me quickly add that this is taking potable water, creating potable water, putting it into a non-potable conveyance the Alameda Creek, and then trying to recover it to be retreated again later. This is not normal, this is not simple recycled water. This is purified water. This is taking it to a higher level, tertiary treatment. This, with no conveyance mechanism now, or if for in the foreseeable future to our district. This is not a responsible investment for ACWD.
Well, I'm going to keep an open mind as well. We always constantly, we've been talking about recycled water for years, and it's never penciled out. It's not cheap. And I mean, Director, we just brought up an interesting question that's never raised in my mind before, was temperature. If they build this pilot, which is, I support it to get the data, we're gonna be putting water in the creek that's gonna harm the fish, which we just spent, how many millions?
80 million.
To build those fish ladders, to reestablish fish, and then we establish a flow rate or a constant flow in the creek. It's gonna harm them. We need that data. We need it pretty quick. We don't have a real idea what it's gonna cost yet. I'm willing to wait to see that. The idea, the concept, I'm okay with it. Run the water down the creek, put it in the ground, pump it back out. Yeah, there probably a lot of people are going to be queasy about it, but we also have a lot of people out there, not necessarily that live here, but are in very high positions telling us that we need to do this. And it's great that we may not agree with them, but they are in very high level positions, in positions where they can tell us we're going to agree with them. But here's an opportunity to get some data to show if it works. And if it doesn't, then at least we got something to go back with and say, look, we looked at this. You know, this is a pilot.
The
We're
unit,
not investing the money yet.
Here's where I'm in agreement with you, Director Gunther. If you may recall, about 10 years ago, we invested $250,000 with USD on a recycled water study, right? And I voted in favor of that. Director Weed voted no. But I said the reason I'm voting in favor of these projects and will continue to do so is, although every time the result is that recycled water turns out to be by far the most expensive source of water we could have for our community, in other communities it makes sense, right? And I accept that. But for our purposes, for our Tri-City area, it always turns out to be the most expensive source of water. And the reason I favor doing these studies and will continue to do so is because we have to have the evidence for the community to prove that it is the most expensive source of water.
That's correct.
And if we don't do the studies, then it's just hearsay. Right?
not only is it the most expensive, it's probably 10 times or more expensive than our other options for water.
We don't
It is
have
so
the data
far, we do. We can easily make the numbers. We know how much, it's proven technology. We know how much it's going to cost. We can easily determine how little of it we're going to recover. And then you're going to retreat it again. The cost is astronomically larger. It's not a rational water supply source.
Imagine that none of us are on this board 10 years from now.
And we'll be looked at as complete fools if we adopt it.
And you have a whole new board, right? And they are going to be reliant on the previous studies and data that was produced by the water district. And if you've got a bunch of environmentalists on this board down the road, well, then there's the hard evidence to say, no, you're not going to be doing something correct. And we need this data to help buttress our case for not doing recycled water.
There are numerous purified water projects in the country and in the state. This is nothing all that special. We have all the data in the world. And if you want to measure water, go put release water with some traces and see how much you capture downstream. It's gonna be that would be a lot less expensive than spending $5,000 or more an acre foot on producing water
I'm
for a
just going to
pilot.
say that they're great discussions, and I'm pretty sure we'll be having this discussion again, but in front of us is just a staff report about this pilot project, and I think it's really clear for the record that I support the project and Director Wee does not support the project, and I think the other three directors are keeping their eyes wide open and they're staying neutral at this point, Director Akbari. I think you're-
I
okay.
want to thank the Assistant General Manager of DSR-SD for joining us tonight
So,
and listening to our debate here this evening.
yeah, no,
But,
we're very passionate about this.
I am looking forward to learning more.
Thank you.
And thank you to Ms. Oshiro for the presentation.
Yes.
It's amazing. We had the comments about concerns over water, over expenses at this district, and then we do something, this nonsense. It's absolutely mind boggling.
I think we have a public comment.
Please, we have, yes, Mr. Kenan.
Yes, yes, very spirited debate. I think I am in concurrence with the majority of the board in that, this is, keep an open mind. This is just an option to explore. I do give kudos to the new name for recycled wastewater, purified water. I was unfortunately not at this previously aforementioned committee meeting. So this question may also have been discussed there, and if it was, I apologize. But Director Weed brought up one point about dumping warm water into the creek and potentially harming the fish, which is obviously a concern. My concern is slightly different, is that if this pilot does go forward and 0.2 million gallons a day of water is added into Alamo Creek and on a continual basis, is that going to potentially change the ecosystem of that creek and potentially lead to an establishment of a critter that happens to be on the ESA? The Simpsons scream-up pillar comes to mind. And then, if one were to cease the pilot, you would run into problems, right? So, when I hear the term pilot, that means it's a trial, and one needs to have an exit strategy. And if executing the pilot opens the risk that you're going to trigger some obscure ESA provision, then the pilot is no longer a pilot, right? Because you may be committed to forever adding 0.2 million gallons a day of water into the creek, whether or not you want to or not. And that is a concern that I have about, no good deed goes unpunished, knock-on effects. And again, it's not to be debated tonight, but I just wanted to add that to the list of things that should be investigated should the pilot go forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Nishar. I would note that, for clarification, that while the treated water is warm, it's going into a portion of the watershed, a major portion of the watershed, which is too warm for the steelhead trout or salmon in any case. In fact, it's conveniently not forgotten or not mentioned when we discuss the fish ladders. So we're going down a rabbit hole, and we've been down there before. It's not our first venture. And a Never Land, it's a theater of the absurd when you get involved in some of these environmental issues. We're in another theater of the absurd. So, thank you.
Just one factual point, I believe staff, can you clarify? My understanding is that temperature is one of the data point that this pilot project will be collecting.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll ask Ms. Heides to add to this, but yeah, water quality parameters, including temperature, of course, are key in a pilot study. Certainly impacts on fish and habitat have been thought about. Part of the approach here is to evaluate these things. And so, there has been some initial discussions with permit agencies. There's been initial discussions with various NGOs associated with supporting fish and fish habitat. And so far, folks are supportive. That doesn't mean that everything's going to work out great, but these are some of the things that need to be evaluated if something larger would take place in the future.
I think you covered it. Definitely, it's been brought up and something to consider.
Okay.
Okay, so we
The
really,
board has made their presentation.
yeah,
Our comments.
the board's presentation was much longer than staff's.
Yes, yes.
So actually, this is very helpful to staff. We really appreciate the discussion. We expect nothing less. So thank you very much. And again, thanks, Ms. Lee, for joining us, and thank you, Kelsey. That completes our staff presentations this evening, and we can move on to general manager's reports if that will work for the board. Okay, so I'll try and we've got actually a few general managers reports, and the first up here is a quick report on COVID-19, as quick as it can be. As you know, case rates in the community remain pretty high. The district continues to not be immune from that. So we've been seeing more and more cases amongst staff. In fact, there have been 18 new cases reported since my last report to the board back in May. That's our highest number of cases over any 1 month period during the pandemic. So certainly this strain has been a strain on us. So we've, there have been some operational disruptions, nothing major. We've had to shuffle some staff to ensure that we're providing coverage for various things. We've had to prioritize certain work, primarily field work and related to emergency service line repairs and so forth and so on. So, but we're managing to get by. This customers have not been impacted by this, but and we're seeing things start to slow down. We were encouraged as of the last couple of days. We hadn't had any new cases since May 31, but then we had 3 new cases just the other day. So things seem to be stabilizing as we look at the data from the state and from the county. But we're continuing to watch things very carefully. We have adopted some additional protocols. You can see we're all wearing masks. I think I mentioned previously that we had suspended the mandatory in-office or in-person requirements associated with telework program. We further expanded that to ensure that we're kind of making sure that we're moving staff off site where we can still be productive and still get everything we need to be done, but minimize any chance of additional spread or any spread amongst staff at our facilities. So we're doing a number of things. We're also now doing mandatory testing for folks that are working on site, whether they're vaccinated or not. And that's one of the requirements under Cal OSHA's emergency temporary standards related to COVID for the numbers of cases that we have. So, we, again, we're watching this and trying to do what we can to ensure that our customers are not impacted, that we're providing the services that we need to provide, and that we're keeping our employees as safe as we can and protect them and support them and their families. So, we are very hopeful that things will further settle down soon.
I will express for myself, Mr. Stevenson, I would feel a lot more comfortable if we went back to Zoom meetings, both for committee and board meetings. I don't know whether that's shared by the rest of the board, but that's my personal opinion.
Well, I will tell you that there hasn't been significant evidence of spread here at the workplace. And what we're really seeing, I think, is a result of a lot of spread in the community. However, I'm certainly interested in what the board feels. I know that transition is always difficult, and one thing we could do is kind of watch conditions over the next few weeks and entertain some options, perhaps.
May note that we have the ability to have a hybrid meeting, and any member who wishes to Zoom into the meeting as opposed to coming into the boardroom is welcome to do that.
That's correct. Under the district's ongoing resolution related to AB 361, a member of the board may participate virtually.
That's also members of the staff as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
All right.
any other questions or comments? Okay. Also wanted to let you know that we have a public information meeting on an upcoming capital project, and I'll ask Mr. Awoke to pass along some information to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board members and community members. As you might recall, the Avalon Tank Slope Erosion Protection Project came to the board back in April for a construction contract award. The project is intended to address slope erosion issues at the Avalon Tank site and reduce maintenance needs of the hillside drainage system at this remote site. It's not an easy access to site for many reasons. The board approved the construction contract, as I said, to Disney Construction in April. Construction is expected to commence in early July and be completed by late October. In order to inform the public about the project, we have a virtual public information meeting, which is planned for June 29th, as Mr. Stevenson mentioned. It will be from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. via Zoom. We will present at this meeting, we will present an overview of the project, planned construction activities, and schedule and timelines of the construction activities. We will open this meeting to the public. We will present the overview of the project and anticipated construction activities, and we'll have some time for Q&A. Depending on the number of board members attending, the meeting will be advertised as a special board meeting. In order to notify the public, we will be sending out mailers to adjacent property owners, HOAs, and properties along the route, the truck route, in order to inform the public of the upcoming project. We will also utilize our social media and website to put out messaging. In addition, we will record the meeting and make it available to those unable to attend the meeting. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Questions
I
about
will
that?
plan on attending.
I'll try and be there.
Okay. We'll make a note of that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Also, quick update on the American Waterworks Association Best Tasting Water Competition. So new news from our Director of Operations and Maintenance, Kurt Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, members of the board. Hopefully positive news. If you recall, back in April, the California and Nevada section of AWWA, or American Water Association, held their spring conference. And as part of the conference, the district participated in the best tasting drinking water competition. We were disappointed that we didn't win that contest. We had suspected we might have been in the finals, but they didn't really announce that. But we did receive information just recently. We were contacted by the contest organizers and informed that the winning agency will not be allowed to compete at the national level. They wouldn't expand on why, and I won't mention their name. They cheated. So something was going on. So we were invited to participate at the national level. So tonight I just want to inform the board that ACWD will be participating in the 2022 Best of the Best Taste Test at the AWWA National Conference, the annual conference and exposition, or ACE, they usually had advertised, which will be held next week in San Antonio, Texas.
Next
So
week.
we've sent off our water samples and we'll find out, hopefully, I think Tuesday's the judging. So I just want to let the board know. We'll see how we do.
So
Compete
get ready to
against the
add
best in the nation.
yet another award to the trophy case.
There
It's
you go.
getting kind of full right now. All right, any questions about that?
Mr. Aarons, you were not here at the district, but about 10 years ago for Earth Day, there was a competition at Washington Hospital comparing ACWD water to all of these bottled waters, and we came out #1.
All right.
It was a blind taste test.
Yep.
From people, and they got to score the different 10 different waters, and we came out right on top, which was really kind of a delight to see. You know, people were really surprised. Oh, it's the drinking tap water? You know?
I believe it's been almost 30 years since we did place nationally, I think third or so. AWWA contest.
No time like the present to do it again.
And I know who the cheaters are, so next time we go to Aqua.
Okay, so my next GM report has to do with another opportunity to attend a presentation on the Delta Conveyance Project that is sort of an encore of a presentation that was offered by the state water contractors and Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority during Aqua. That meeting was constrained in terms of participants because it was all subject to the Brown Act, and so we could have only up to 2 directors there. I recently sent an email to the board letting you know that there are 2 more opportunities to participate in really it's going to be the same presentation, the same materials. There's a desire to ensure that the key stakeholders are fully informed about the project before release of the EIR, which is expected soon. As it stands, so the 2 dates that I provided in my email to you were June 15, that's 9 to 11 a.m. The second date was June 23 from 2 to 4. And this is a hybrid. You could attend in person in Sacramento or virtually. There's an option. The Wednesday, June 15, 9 to 11, I have that booked up now. So I have 2 potential slots available for June 23 from 2 to 4. And so you can feel free to let me know now, or you can just respond to that email and let Gina and I know if you'd like to participate. And if so, would you like to participate virtually or would you plan to go in person, and we can let them know.
So this is really for the benefit of the 3 board members to my right.
You could also participate.
It would kind of be redundant.
I don't-
Something each time. It's a big project. It's only 16 billion under, with the potential of increasing in cost.
Yeah, but I pay close attention to the Design and Construction Authority, and then I'm on the Finance Authority. I get my fill of this stuff.
Okay, all right. A lot of it too has to do with messaging to the community and the work that they've done with their stakeholders and so forth too in advance of
I may
release of the
try to
EIR.
make that, but I'm be out of town, so I'll be zooming in if I do.
Since there's restrictions on the Brown Act, I want to give the other board members a chance to.
Sure.
So I'm
Participate.
assuming I'm the one who hasn't yet responded.
You have not responded yet?
So, and I was hoping to do the 15th. The 23rd, I have a conflict 2 to 4, but I will see if I can move that around because I do want to attend the presentation. I will do my best to make that happen.
I might be able to move mine, because I'm on that 15th. I might be able to shift.
Okay. If you would let us know, please, by Monday, we can firm things up with the DCA. All right, and if there is an issue, a conflict or overlap, we'll want to work that out with you
Yeah,
so that we only have 2.
Yeah, if it's not possible for me to attend the 15th, then I will be there on.
You know,
Okay.
this presentation is not a lot different from what the executive director delivered here to us in our board room.
Much of it is very similar to what
Yeah.
Graham Bradner.
And it's also available on the website. With a nice presentation there where you can leisurely take your time to digest what's going on.
Right. Okay, so any input there, we appreciate it. Also, just quick update, a reminder, I think you received an email about this too. The district will be participating in the July 4th parade for the city of Fremont. Obviously, July 4 on Monday at 10 a.m. is when the parade gets going. So if you want to participate, love to have you. Maybe show up a few minutes before 10 a.m. The staging area is near the Fremont Main Library. And so if you are planning to attend, it would be great if you could let Shireen or me or both of us know. We can plan for you to be there. And also, let's see, lastly, we're going to be participating in the Festival of India, the India Day Melee Fair. And that's Saturday and Sunday, August 20 and 21 from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. We'll have a booth there at the fair both days. We're booth number 171. We'll send out more information about this again, another reminder as we get closer. But so we'll be out there meeting and talking to all of our constituents and talking in large part about the drought issues related to that. Also, just quickly, because the board did adopt the budget this evening, we won't need our meeting currently on the calendar for June 23rd. So we'll send out a note on that coming up to free up your evening on the 23rd. All right.
Darn, we sure could have used that extra workshop.
Okay. With that, that completes our general manager's reports.
All right, thank you. Then we move on to item director's comments, reports on meetings attended, and agenda item request. Let's first do director's comments, so we can go to the meetings attended. Are there any comments from members of the direct board? None? Okay. I would note that since the last meeting, Aqua has published a white paper, one of the very few that they do, and it's been a number of years on from the local governance committee related to property tax, use of the property tax statement for billing of service charges. And the prime mover of that was Director Sethy. It is a document that it's remarkably rare for Aqua to take a position and change a practice within an industry. And so the ability and the clarification of the legality of that, the thought is, I think, a huge asset and will be of great benefit to districts as they learn for a far more established rate. And I would add that if there's a third vote for putting delinquent bills on the property tax statement, I would certainly be pleased to put it on the agenda. So there's no other comment. Let's move on to item 7.1.
Thank you for those comments, President. That's very much appreciated. I did put my heart and soul over the last 4 years into trying to move Aqua, and it took a lot of work and a lot of persuasion through many different of the Aqua committees to produce the result that we finally ended up with. But I do want to give credit to all the people that were on the working group that I was chairing with Ms. Claire Collins, Mr. Miyake's law partner at Hanson Bridget. Without her, I don't think we could have gotten done what we achieved. So I want to give her all the deserving appreciation for what she contributed to.
Thank you. Then we move then to item 7.1, which is the report to directors Sethy and Weed for Region 2 and 4 tour and program at Shasta Lake. Sethy?
Why don't you go first and tell about our excursion.
It's an interesting bus tour. We had the opportunity to go up to Sacramento and then spend the night, and then start at 7:30 in the morning at the Aqua headquarters, getting on a bus and driving up to Shasta. It's a long drive, but a pleasant drive. We were given a tour of them both on the water and within the Shasta Dam. Clarifications and knowledge myself of what is going on. The dam is down, the water level in the lake is down 120 feet from its high point. And it's still functioning, still producing power. It was an extraordinary effort at the time of World War II when they rushed it in, and it provided power, critical power to the United States in its war effort. And ironically, it's one of the dams that even back in Washington, federal government acknowledges could be raised in a cost-effective manner, providing additional water supply and storage. There was part of the presentation involved the Sites Reservoir, which a number of the individuals would like to see built to allow more water from Shasta to be put to non-public benefit uses, which is non-fish, could help the agriculture. But it is a It's an impressive, structure, and it was good just to meet with people and, have the trip. Rex, I think.
Yes, so the reservoir is only 40% full currently. It has a maximum capacity of 4.5 million acre feet. So if we figure ACWD at maximum of 45,000 acre feet a year, we're 1% of what would be in that reservoir. That's not our water source. It's part of the federal system, not the state system. But that kind of puts it in perspective of how big that reservoir is. And Senator Feinstein, has been in favor of raising the dam for years. Senator Barbara Boxer, who I've known personally and have a lot of respect for, opposed it all of her years in office, and we've really gotten nowhere on that project. We came close under President Trump, but now we've gone backwards again. And so it's an opportunity for the state of California where we could add potentially another 1 million or 1.5 million acre feet of water to our supply system. It's very much opposed by the environmental groups that are out there. I was really surprised at the vision of President Roosevelt on this dam because I've been in other dams and they're very industrial inside with narrow passageways, but he specifically wanted this dam to be made available for the public to see and explore. There are over 5 miles of tunnels in the dam. John and I got to walk past the 5 generators, which are the largest generators I've ever seen. I've been in Harvey Banks and Jones pumping plants and other places, but those are absolutely the largest generators I've ever seen. All 5 were quiet until they started up 2 of them. I was surprised how quiet they were. We actually got trapped in the dam 43 stories below. We journeyed all the way through the dam and came back to the primary elevator, which holds up to about 30, 40 people. Huge elevator. And the elevator was non-functioning when we came back. They'd just done all the repairs to the electronics and everything a week before, so we waited half an hour for them to try and get the elevator running again. And you have to remember, we're down where it's very cool and it's kind of claustrophobic for a lot of people. And some people were becoming very anxious at that point because people were fearing that we would have to walk up 43 stories in the dam. And so they finally determined that the elevator was not going to be functional that day. So we had to walk all the way back through the dam and make a journey outdoors to where the bus could come and pick us up, the tour bus. So it's quite an interesting excursion. And what I was surprised about, and this goes back to the vision of President Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, was how beautiful these halls are, that he was putting people to work under the Public Works program. So everything is beautifully tiled and Art Deco, and with conference rooms set up so that you could educate the public. And the vision of that president in terms of, and it was the same chief engineer who designed Shasta Reservoir as who designed Hoover Dam, that he really wanted to make this publicly visible so people could feel the strength, the power of the United States, what we were doing as a country, and take pride in what the country was doing. So I was very impressed with that. I have some quick reports aside from that on Shasta Dam. One, I was very interested in the presentation we were given by one of the gentlemen there, who is the Assistant General Manager of Sites Reservoir. And so he was presenting on everything that's going on that project, but also informed us about the entire ecosystem of the North Sacramento River Valley, and how all of the rice industry is affected by the drought, and then the Pacific flyover that helps with all the birds and everything. They do their nesting and feeding in what's left over of the rice after it's harvested. The fields are flooded, and now all of this flyover is devastated by the 3-year drought. And a lot of our wildlife is dying as a result of what's going on. So you can really tell how the whole ecosystem works together. I thought the best part of our trip up there was my conversations with Dave Egerton on the bus, and he thanked me for all the hard work on producing this new service charges on the property tax roll. And he said, you're recognized throughout the state of California right now. I almost came to tears when he patted me on the back and said, this is really good work, and you've made a difference for all of California. When we got up to Shasta Dam and we were having lunch, and this happened in front of President Weed, Aqua President Pam Tobin came over to me and she said, I would like to have lunch with you today, and I would like to learn more about you and what your thoughts are on different water issues. Wow, there's 40 people here. She's asking to have lunch with me. So for an hour and a half, we talked about 3 different things. I told her about my thoughts on the Delta conveyance system and my thoughts going all the way back to Governor Pat Brown's original vision for the state water project. And she acknowledged that she wasn't even aware of a lot of the things I was talking about in terms of the history of what's going on in the Delta. And I told her we need to bring this to greater prominence in future Aqua meetings, and we need to have the executive directors of both the Design and Construction Authority and the Finance Authority give presentations in a broad forum at Aqua. So she said she's going to work on that. Then I told her next, Aqua needs to engage better with the Department of Water Resources on the reoperation of reservoirs across the state, that we have too many opportunities that only require modest investment, like Lake Del Valle, where we could be opening up, a lot more storage of water on existing sites. And this is especially true all up and down Highway 5 on the western side of the valley. So she said, that's a really good point. And we haven't talked much about that as Aqua organization. And lastly, I talked to her about brackish water desal. I said, we have so many opportunities in the state of California, and she was unaware of our own facility here in Newark. And so I explained it to her and said, even if you capitalize the costs of what we put in to that investment, it's still our lowest cost of water. And she's going, really? Wow. I would expect it to be your highest cost. And I said, no, it's our cheapest source of water, and it's supplying, 20% of our community's needs. And so on each one of these 3 things, she said, well, what's holding up what's going on? And I said, Pam, we are, the entire environmental community has become our enemy in the water industry. They will not participate in any Aqua conference. The Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, Trust for Public Land, you can go down the whole list of environmental organizations. I've always considered myself an environmentalist. I was a member of our Sierra Club chapter for decades. After getting elected here, they decided to remove me because of our ACWD positions on Delta conveyance and other issues. So the entire environmental community is stalling all of these important projects that can be accomplished in California, especially all the brackish water desal plants up and down the coast of California, because they're anti-growth. They do not want to see any new sources of water being supplied. Meanwhile, Fort Bragg and Mendocino are running out of water. Cambria is running out of water, right? And we talked about the Poseidon, I want to say Poseidon Adventure. That's an old movie. The Poseidon Project down in Huntington Beach, which just a couple of weeks ago, all of the appointees of Governor Brown and Governor Newsom voted 16-0 against this project. It's been decades in the works. And why did they do that? Because the entire environmental community unanimously opposed the project. A project that has been so well thought of. And I told President Tobin, listen, we've got 14,000 desal plants around the world. Much of Israel is run on it. And there's no damage to the Eastern Mediterranean or any of these other large bodies of water. And it is sickening that we cannot get a project done in California. Look at how many decades it took to get the Carlsbad project done. And we are absolutely being killed by all of these environmental organizations. And I'm kind of fed up with it. So we had a very good discussion on these 3 different items. And I told her I really appreciated that she asked me to sit down with her and to share my thoughts on these different issues. So that's my report on Shasta Dam. I have 2 other very quick reports. The Region 5 board accepted my proposal by default for our fall event because there were no other proposals submitted anywhere from the Bay Area down to Santa Barbara. So on Monday, we had our first president of Region 5, John Varela from Valley Water, said, you proposed it, you earned the right, you earned the opportunity to be the chair of the working group. So we met on Monday. We had a very good planning meeting with staff from Aqua. And then secondarily, I wanted to inform the board that the working group that has been working on putting that drafted up the document on putting the service charges on the property tax bill, we have now moved into the second phase of trying to propose legislation that will clean up the public health and safety code from section 15 or 5470 to 5474.10. And we had our first meeting also on Monday of this past week, and Ms. Collins and I, we were co-chairing again. This is now getting down into the nitty-gritty of the actual language of the law, word by word, and much of it going back 100 years or more. And so it's quite an exercise, and I can foresee there's going to be a lot of work this summer just to deliver a proposal to the Aqua State Legislative Committee that will process this into something that can be potentially, what do they call it? Sponsored by one or more legislators. So just wanted to give that update, and we're yeah, that's it. We're gonna spend more. It's gonna take a lot more time, but we're gonna get there. So thank you for allowing me to give this report today.
All right, well, thank you. We now have, that finishes our normal agenda. We have a regular agenda. We have a closed session, and then we come back to open session. So closed session pursuant to government code Section 54957.6, the conference with labor negotiators and agency designated representatives. And the agency representatives were the board president, myself, John Weed, and vice president Paul Sethy. This is with the general manager and unrepresented employee.
It should say unrepresented, but
Yeah,
it says
notice that.
unpresented. So you are an unpresentable general manager right now.
I've been accused of worse.
Freudian. So thank you. We are now going into a closed session.
And for the record, the general manager won't be in that closed session. Just make sure that
Our
the record
council
reflects
reflects
that.
Okay.
Saffron in there?
Well, it's 9:44 and closed session, we had no action taken. So let me then, as we come back into open session, have item 9.1 is a consideration of resolution approving an amendment to employment agreement with the general manager. Can we refer this to the attorney?
Yeah, thank you, President Weed. On June 10th, 2021, the district entered into an employment agreement with Ed Stevenson to employ him as the district's general manager. The district and Mr. Stevenson desire to amend the employment agreement to increase the general manager's compensation from step 2 to step 3 of the salary schedule to an annual salary of $284,212 effective July 1st, 2022. All the other terms and conditions of the employment agreement will remain the same. So when it's appropriate for the board, somebody should make a motion to consider the adoption of the resolution to approve the First Amendment to the employment agreement between the general manager and the district. So the district
Thank you.
or can make any
Do we
comments.
have a motion and we can discuss the
If I
motion?
could just ask a clarifying question, is the person has to make sure payroll is done correctly. Is that starting with the pay period that includes July 1st, 2022? I know that's typically how we do wage adjustments is with the pay period.
With the pay period,
Because if it's a specific date, I'll just need to make sure staff are aware of that, and that's a difference from normal processes.
yeah, so the draft resolution actually says effective July 1, 2022. And so if the payroll period is different, it's up to the board to decide what would be the actual effective date if it's different from July.
Good. So I guess my preference would be effective with the pay period that includes July 1st. That would be consistent with how adjustments are made for all other employees.
Yeah, so we could amend the First Amendment to say that.
Do you wish us to, okay? You could state the proposed amendment and then we'll have a motion to approve the as amended.
Sure. So the First Amendment, Section 1, salary, says Section 5 salary of the employment agreement is amended to increase the employee's annual salary to $284,212, which is step 3 of the salary schedule for the general manager classification. And it will now read, it used to read effective July 1. It will now read effective with the pay period that includes July 1, 2022, period. No cost of living increase will be applied. So the amendment is to add with the pay period that includes. Is that clear enough? Yeah.
Do we have a motion with that amendment?
So I'll make the motion as stated by our attorney.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? We'll leave a round of comment after the motion. So roll call, please.
Director Sethy,
I will vote yes and enthusiastically for this adjustment in pay for our general manager. It's well deserving. I will back it up in public.
Director Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. And did any board member wish to make a final comment?
Agree with Director Sethy.
All right. Thank you for your service. Short.
Just to the board, thank you very much for considering the amendment, and I really do appreciate
the support of this board, not only for myself, but for staff and for the rest of the agency. The good work you all do, and I do appreciate you considering this amendment, so thank you.
Take your wife out for a nice dinner.
Get the kids some good shoes.
They're doing fine with shoes.
Fine. All right, thank you. I need to sign a document or leave. And so, and is there any other business before the board? There being
And
none,
adjournment
we are adjourned.
at 9:48.
Yes.
I should be able to change them.